He stands like a fortification in the dimly lit corridor, and his gaze hardens as he looks at his opponent. If they have chosen this path, he declares with cold determination, then from now on he will show no mercy. The element of his power bursts forth. He summons a colossal dragon from roaring flames, filling the hall with scorching heat. His opponent recoils in horror, trembling, for he recognizes the terrifying might of the one called White Devil, Feria. When Inferno rages, he looks back on his path and knows, this is only a step toward becoming the most powerful mage. This is the chronicle of a young man who decided to restore honor to his fallen house, and this goal burns brighter than any spell. Long ago, under the endless and calm sky, the mountain peaks stood silently steadfast sentinels over the wild nature. In the undergrowth, life flowed more slowly, unaware that fate was already beginning to unfold nearby. Hidden behind a curtain of leaves, a young boy and his mentor watched the clearing intently, holding their breath. They did not move, their presence swallowed by the rustling noise of the trees. They waited until their target appeared. A majestic horned stag with large, truly massive antlers came into view, their branches spread out like trees. The mentor quietly pointed at it and called this creature the perfect test for the boys in training. Turning to his pupil, the man advised that since the boy was now grown, today he must take the initiative. He challenged him to strike from this distance without damaging the precious hide, forcing the boy to consider what was better, a lightning storm or a precise wind arrow. He began to gather mana and compress it into a small point of energy high in speed. Holding his arm steady and looking sharply, he prepared to release a strike that was to demonstrate his skill over the elements. He straightens his arm, focuses mana into a sharp tip, while his father watches, and in his gaze with each moment appears an increasingly clear understanding. He releases the energy in a sudden burst. An invisible force flies through the clearing and hits the large horned stag without fail. The beast falls instantly. One clean strike puts an end to the hunt. The mentor is stunned. Such power and precision can appear already on the first attempt. A wave of pride rises in him. The boy confesses he trained secretly to earn his father's praise. This confession brings a broad smile to the elder. He gently tousles his hair, then asks when exactly he managed to master such a complex technique. When the sun begins to sink behind the jagged mountain peaks, the elder hunter decides it's time to return. He plans to prepare food and sell the remaining hide in the city the next day. As soon as they reached their modest home, they were greeted by the warm light of the hearth and their mother's friendly smile, who said that dinner was almost ready and gladly welcomed them both back. Despite the long day, the young mage immediately starts helping around the house, carrying dishes to the table. The mother looks at him, mixing concern and gratitude in her gaze, says he needs to rest, but thanks him for being such a diligent helper. His efforts are interrupted by the energetic arrival of his younger brother Marcus. The boy rushes forward and exclaims joyfully. He meets his older brother with open arms, happy that he returned home after hunting. He jumps up with joy and tugs his older brother's sleeve to share the day's news. Their mother gently stops them. She orders them to wash their hands while dinner is being prepared so they can talk over the meal. After her order, the boy rushes away and the mother jokingly warns him not to trip. For now, Leon helps, carrying a stack of plates to the table, his face calm and composed like a true assistant. When everyone finally settled, the family of four gathered around the wooden table, hands clasped in a brief gesture of gratitude before the meal. The dish was modest but hearty. It filled the room with a sense of homey comfort. When they start eating, Leon takes a spoonful of soup and his eyes light up as he praises his mom's cooking. She smiles warmly and reminds him that she made his favorite dish especially because today is his birthday. The conversation shifts again to the day's achievements when Dominic proudly tells his wife Leon has successfully hunted a big stag for the first time. Ren is noticeably impressed. Edge says that from tomorrow they will be able to cook many dishes with meat. I do not want to be left out of this hustle and bustle. Marcus leans forward eagerly with a fork in hand, demanding that everyone listen to the end of his story. He is bursting with his own news. With a triumphant smile, he declares that today he successfully cast soap bubble magic for the first time. He skillfully describes the sensation and explains how the bubbles appeared with a gentle release as soon as he focused. This news throws the brother off track. Leon looks at him with wide, admiring eyes and understands Marcus can also control magic. The younger boy shines with pride, happy to join the family magical heritage. He just showed how rapidly his talent is unfolding. And the family began talking about the shared roots of their magical gift. Dominic noted, everyone in the house has an innate inclination toward mystical arts, so the future looks very promising for the little one. Ren, as always a caring mother, cautiously warned, if they push the limits too far, they could get caught in the danger of mana exhaustion. Soon the child is already sleeping soundly. The strength is exhausted from the day's adventures and from the first successful use of magic, and the house is quiet. The conversation turns to Leon, who has turned 15. This is a turning point. He needs to choose a path, and the parents will wonder if he has already decided how he sees his future. He approaches them. Nohai's usual frivolity disappears, replaced by a solemn, focused mood. He stands straight and addresses them with quiet respect. He is ready to announce the choice he made after long internal doubts. With a firm voice, he announces that he intends to enter the magical academy. The room falls silent as his mother looks at him with pride and anxiety at the same time. His father, however, asks if he is truly sure that he wants to take this difficult and potentially dangerous path. The seasonal hunter leans forward. His gaze hardens as he speaks about his social barriers beyond the bounds of their home. He warns, the academy claims to treat all students equally, but in reality it is a fortress for nobles, many of whom carry an ancient, ingrained prejudice against commoners and those whose families have strayed from the path. Grabbing his son by the shoulder, the older man emphasizes, Leon's appearance will only make him an even bigger target. His striking silver hair and blue eyes are features that cannot be hidden, so they will constantly attract unwanted attention in a place where elites are accustomed to being disappointed by family history. He does not soften his tone, he simply retreats in manner, explaining, his words are born of deep anxiety, not a desire to stifle his son's dreams. He meets Leon's gaze and asks if there is a specific, unwavering reason why he feels he must take this difficult path despite the obvious risks. The question remains unanswered as the present dissolves in the shadow of the past. 5 years ago, in the cold stone walls of a distant corridor, a memory awakens and everything is seen through the prism of one attentive gaze. He stands next to his father while nearby the carriage clinks and stops. Heavy wheels crunch on the ground. From the coach descend a stout man in expensive furs and a boy with sharp features. The nobleman's gaze flashes with recognition and mockingly addresses Leon's father, calling him Lord Heartfilia, a title from the life they left behind. In response to the greeting, Dominic bows low, acknowledges this man as Lord with never-failing studied humility. The aristocrat merely snorts disdainfully, turning a contemptuous glance at the young boy standing next to Dominic, and asks how many years ago the sickly one with the unhappy expression on his face. Maintaining composure despite the cold reception, the boy answers clearly that he will turn 10 years old this year. While the boy speaks, the nobleman leans closer, his eyes squinting, and he examines the child's face with anxiously predatory scrutiny. The nobleman's lip curls. Disgust is immediately visible when he remarks on the boy's unusual hair and eye color, calling it creepy and throwing at the child, demon. Dominic's chin tightens firmly. Silent rage is palpable, and he meets his son with a bloody insult. The anger he feels because of the stubborn silence, as if he is being challenged, does not provoke any outburst in him, yet the blow sends Dominic really flying. Seeing his father fall to the ground, the boy cries out in alarm and runs quickly to him, while the nobleman and his son look down at them with cold, unwavering superiority. The Lord never leans over the young boy. His voice flows with poisonous contempt as he mocks the child's misfortune for being trapped by the treacherous Heartfilia family. He says that Leon truly has a terrible fate, then indulgently orders the carriage to move away, leaving the boy trembling with hurt. Left alone, the boy sinks to the ground. His small hand clenches into a tight fist, and the painful sting from the encounter still lingers. He is gnawed by bitter regret, for his silence even more fiercely burns the poisonous label traitor cast upon his benefactors. Yearning for truth, he digs through family archives for hours until he finally finds his grandfather's old diary. He cannot be stopped. He wants to understand the story that connects Heartfilia's and House of Never. The records reveal a dark conspiracy. Several nobles conspired to cheat the heart of Philly, who was already left without assets, so they themselves left her unable to pay taxes. This financial ruin was then insidiously presented as a deliberate act of treason against the country, resulting in their loss of noble status. Although Nevard was the obvious author of this ruin, the diary notes that he acted so meticulously that no compromising evidence remained. In the boy's heart grows a new resolve, to become a master mage, the only way to restore the family's honor and reclaim their lost title, and he chooses this path as the highest expression of gratitude to those who raised him as their own. He brings this new zeal to his father, explaining that he wants to enter the academy and restore their name. Dominic looks at the boy, and in his eyes and heart mix surprise and pride. In the son's expression, pure, absolute sincerity. Seeing the undying fire in Leon, the man gives full support and encourages, "Do everything you can at the Magical Academy." His mother, though initially hesitant, finds peace in this decision when she recalls her son's temperament. She knows Leon's intelligence and kindness will help him, so she gives him her blessing to follow his dreams. He is overwhelmed with joy and gratitude. The boy beams at his parent. His face lights up with a broad, determined smile. He solemnly promises to work even harder, carrying their hopes with him as he prepares for the trials at Magic Academy. He stands with new determination. The burden of family history settles on his shoulders. Behind him, his father announces that their serious conversation is over and turns to look for something in the cabinets. With a broad, loud smile, the man pulls out a bottle as if to say, now that his son has come of age, they can drink. The wife looks on with a smile that understands everything. He was clearly just waiting for the right moment to get these drinks. He begins pouring the dark liquid into 3 glasses. The festive mood fills the cramped room. The young man watches the blood-red stream, his face a mix of curiosity and caution as he prepares to take his first sip. Carefully taking a sip, the young man first feels a sharp and heavy aftertaste, but as soon as the warmth spreads inside, he realizes it is actually quite pleasant. He reflects on the drink's complexity and catches himself drinking it much more willingly than he initially thought. But the festive atmosphere suddenly breaks. The father unexpectedly falls onto the table and chokes with sobs, leaning against it, unable to hold back tears. The mother can only sigh. Is used to the fact that as soon as the man drinks, he starts to get overly emotional. The weeping man suddenly lunges forward, clings to his son, and pulls him into a suffocating embrace, sobbing, "Don't go." Frozen by unexpected warmth and despair, the boy can only stand still while his father begs him to stay. Despite the tears streaming down his face, the father tries to calm him. This is not a farewell forever, although the grip remains just as strong. The future young mage chokes on his feelings. His own emotions begin to rise in response to the father's vulnerability, laid bare without embellishment. They stand firmly together like a family. His mother gently reminds him their home will always wait for him if it ever becomes too hard, and tears begin to fall from him. He cannot even understand whether they are from wine or from the bittersweet truth about the inevitable departure. He stands ready. The new academy uniform fits perfectly, sharp and solemn, like the morning of his departure, which has finally come. A focused gaze, he announces the departure, and the parents begin to give their final blessings and warnings to stay safe. Before he could take a step, younger brother Marcus threw himself into his arms desperately and tightly. Finally, the separation breaks the boyish restraint. Sucking through his sniffling, the young boy steps back a step and stretches out his hands to offer a small farewell gift. His palms barely tremble. This is a simple bottle with bubblesome, modest gift that gives a bright smile to the boy when he tells his older brother that it guarantees he will never forget them while he is not at school. He balanced himself in the rhythmic rocking of the carriage, chewing over the long road to the royal capital in his thoughts and deciding to use the time to hone his skill, pondering that fire and ice are too volatile for such a confined space, so perhaps a calmer element would suit. With a focused gesture, he summons a pair of flickering water fish dancing in the air of the salon. Their flowing forms indicate increasingly strong control. When the magical constructs splash back into the ordinary container, his thoughts again drift to the family he left behind. In his heart, a warm feeling for his parents and little Marcus. Looking out the window as the rural landscape rolls by, he silently and solemnly vows to become a mage of great renown, resolutely striving to restore the heart language name and repay the debt of love he owes his kin. He is torn from drowsiness by the incessant meowing of a black cat. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, he recognizes the voice calling him. He realizes his long journey is almost at its end. Jumping out of the carriage and muttering his awkward apology for the deep sleep, the young traveler meets the coachman. The latter assures him the road was comfortable and announces that they have already arrived in the bustling royal capital. Just as he was about to set off on foot, the driver handed him a map with the route to the entrance exam location. Slightly bowing his head in a bow and uttering a word of thanks, he took the guide, and the coachman finally wished him safety. Taking his first steps into the very heart of the capital, he immediately felt its incredible scale and energy upon himself. The streets teemed with people, a sharp contrast to the quiet life he left behind. He notices the architecture here is unlike anything in his modest hometown, so the intricate patterns on the facades and majestic stone buildings speak of immense wealth and ancient history. Passing a grand, multi-tiered fountain, he suddenly caught a familiar voice from a neighboring stall. A local merchant called out to the newcomer and welcomed him to the bustling market. A seller approaches him, a burly man with a friendly smile, and offers a tray of sizzling grilled kebabs. He accurately guesses that the boy is a future student of the prestigious Magic Academy, so he offers him a free sample to taste. He takes a bite and immediately opens his eyes wide. The flavor simply explodes, and the simple joy of food momentarily distracts from the entire heaviness of the journey still ahead. With greedy impatience, he approaches a street food stall, orders one grilled lula kebab, and looks as if he is about to eat it all at once. The seller, with a joyful greeting, hands over the dish, welcoming the young traveler to the bustling market. Taking a sip of a comforting piece of salty snack, he wanders the crowded street and marvels at how many kiosks stretch along the entire way. The air is filled with the scent of various treats, and this enhances the lively energy of the capital. Here his gaze catches on a shop specializing in magical instruments, and he mentally decides to return and explore its mysterious space. Just as his main task is completed, the display sparkles with ornaments hinting at wonders hidden inside. While still enjoying his food, he checks the map again and estimates. If he keeps his course along this main road, the academy should soon come into view. And just as he takes a few more steps, uncertainty begins to slowly settle. He stops and reads the parchment again. According to the drawings, the path should be straight, but the landmark he is looking for still does not appear. The feeling of déjà vu is impossible to ignore when he suddenly finds himself in front of the very same shop with magical instruments he just passed by. Confusion furrows his features as he realizes he has somehow returned to a place he should have long left far behind. A cold realization overwhelms him and he freezes in place. His gaze sharpens as he reels in his mind the impossibility of what is happening. The road he walks seems doomed to be wrong, or perhaps the city silence itself is to blame for everything. Looking back at the other travelers, he notices several young people, apparently the same kind of contenders, walking in circles nearby, and despair is increasingly growing on their faces. It turns out he is not the only one stuck in this incomprehensible circle. The trial has already started. He watches as some young man nearby lets off steam and fumes with anger. The foreigner clutching the map looks completely bewildered and shouts that it is impossible. No matter how straight he walks, he always ends up right where he started. He lowers his gaze to the paper and his own hand, suddenly understanding flashes in his eyes. The repetition of the streets and the shared confusion of the other contenders suggest this is not just a coincidence. The inscription on the parchment is clear. All candidates must reach the designated location before the sun sets below the horizon. It is emphasized that punctuality is strictly monitored, no delays or mistakes. He falls onto the cobblestones, lays out the cards before him, and connects the marks. The realization hits him like a physical slap. This labyrinthine circle is not an obstacle to the test, but the test itself. Leon stands amid the hustle and bustle of the capital and tries to make sense of what surrounds him. He decides, first he needs to organize his thoughts and soberly assess the situation. As soon as he moves forward, he is overwhelmed by a feeling of anxiety. The surroundings seem to repeat again and again endlessly. He begins to suspect that someone is using some kind of magic to slow his movement. She is considering the possibility of a large-scale spell that would affect everyone nearby, but quickly dismisses the idea. It's too incredible. His gaze suddenly flares up, the crowd disappears, and he remains alone on the quiet street. Realization hits him like a physical slap, clenches the documents, and understands the trial that awaits him. He finds the necessary defense to deny the very delusion. With a sharp intake of breath, his eyes narrow. He directs inner energy to split the magical veil that clouds his vision. The illusion shatters, and before him rise the enormous gates of the academy like a fortress standing invincibly. He lets out a cry of triumph. He has finally reached the place he was heading to. Barely making it on time, he meets a familiar, sturdy figure of the seller. He immediately showers sincere greetings and confirms Leon Hartfilia successfully passed the entrance exam. A giant, muscular man stands before him. He introduces himself as Grant and says that he is now their new teacher in the class. Grant looks closely. Both he and the boy next to him pass the test at the entrance almost at the same moment. It turns out they are the best candidates from the new batch. Confident in his victory, he throws his arms up and bursts out in a triumphant shout, celebrating his official admission to the academy while the other candidates, including the familiar face of the market saleswoman, simply watch, mixed with fatigue and relief. Turning to his comrade, a successful contender, Leon enthusiastically introduces himself and extends his hand in a gesture of friendship. Markai's classmate responds with a bright smile, and their new bond is sealed with a firm handshake as the path unfolds ahead. The celebration does not last long. In a moment, the senior student is immediately sent to lead the freshmen to their classes. The group begins to follow their senior through the sprawling academy grounds. The weight of the new reality finally sinks in. While they walk, he leans closer to Mike and whispers a question about the true nature of the entrance exams and their tricks. He wonders if his new friend also noticed the hidden mechanics of the test they just passed. Mark suddenly shudders from shock. His cheeks flush, and in panic he covers his interlocutor's mouth, deeply worried that the elders might hear them speaking so openly about the exam secrets. Unfazed, he lays out his theory. The exam was a sophisticated combination of illusion and teleportation magic. He suggests that those who failed to break the illusion were simply teleported back to the start into a trap loop that recreates the streets outside the academy to test their perception. Mark freezes in admiration at such keen observation, marveling at the depth of his insight. He just shrugs and smiles modestly, as if to say he noticed these clues only by chance, not due to any special skill of his own. As if casually, he explains his actions to Marcus, admitting that he simply sensed a magical presence and decided to try the cancellation spell at random, and even considers himself incredibly lucky that it worked. His companion widens his eyes and freezes in amazement. His voice fills with genuine admiration as he notes that very few candidates would have noticed this subtle manipulation at all. Hearing this, the young mage cannot hold back, and his face lights up with a broad, confident smile. A wave of optimism washes over him as he recalls how his new life at the academy started simply wonderfully. As they continued walking, the senior guide led the small group down a majestic corridor. Luxurious portraits of ancient figures stretched along the walls, and the air hung heavy with the history of the institution itself. Then he begins to explain the school's structure. He says that students are divided into 3 tiers: Aints, ZVI, and DRE depending on exam results, and reveals that they were placed in the prestigious top class. He teasingly remarks, even those who stumbled on the exam, like the red-haired boy, still earned their place thanks to a combination of luck and pure potential. The senior student further clarifies, the initial placement matters, but the academy truly values the ability to respond to the unexpected. And then, gesturing toward a whole row of doors, he announces that they have reached their destination. Inside, the classroom unfolds as a huge multi-level amphitheater lecture hall. Endless rows of empty wooden benches hold silence and tense anticipation. Scattered throughout the room are their new classmates, a girl who has laid her head on the desk, a boy with dark hair and a stern, focused gaze, and another student who looks off into the distance with the quiet calm of contemplation. He sits silently in his seat while Leon and Marcus survey the hall. Their eyes stop at a sign marking the area as free seating. Marcus, ever the optimist, suggests sitting right in the center of the class, and Leon immediately supports this idea. When they move to take their seats, progress is sharply cut off by a sudden, bloody thud. A hand presses the palm into the table with all its fury blocking their way and shattering the silence in the room. The noise comes from a mocking student named Darren Lowes. He looks at them contemptuously, and it sends chills down the spine. He mocks their commoner state and demands they move even further away from nobility, even though the rules are clearly and plainly written on the board. Leon's face hardens, his patience cracks from the brazen display. When the tension reaches its limit, a calm, authoritative voice cuts in from behind. Another student steps forward and firmly orders Darren to stop his behavior. Darren flinches, defensively bristles, and tries to claim that this is a private matter between him and the newcomers. He steps closer, and his presence immediately commands respect, so he lectures Darren on the principles of the academy. He declares, within these walls, the difference between a noble and a commoner does not matter, and even being the second prince, he will not allow such arrogant conceit. Having silenced the haughty noble, he turns his gaze to the pair and introduces himself as Heathcliff. While doing so, Marcus freezes for a moment. Din is the surname of the royal family, and Heathcliff politely apologizes for the trouble his companion caused. He gives them a restrained smile and makes it clear that he hopes they will enjoy their time at the academy. Marcus is immediately impressed by what seems to be the prince's kindness and modesty, a sharp and at the same time welcome contrast to the hostility they just faced. Despite the prince's outward friendliness, Leon feels an icy detachment in how the royal court handled the situation. He understands Heathcliff did not truly defend them as equals. It was merely a reprimand for a subordinate noble. Not once did he genuinely acknowledge Leon or Marcus as people worthy of his direct attention. He froze in place and looked away while his thoughts raced ahead, considering the consequences of the prince's intervention, even as the threat from Darren Lowe was obvious. Leon could not help but feel the prince is a far more complex and potentially dangerous obstacle, whose motivation was hidden beneath polite royal masks. Suddenly, the heavy silence in the classroom was broken by the powerful voice of Grant, their class teacher. He stood before the entire group with a broad, confident smile and welcomed the newcomers who had already passed the entrance exams before the sun had even set. With just a slight wave of his hand, the instructor demonstrated the practical use of magic. Stacks of orientation documents rose and floated through the air directly to each student. Marcus, with wide-open eyes, watched the papers, then whispered to Leon how incredible it was to see magic so organically woven into daily life. When each student held a packet in their hands, the large man ordered them to fully concentrate and commanded them to watch with their eyes as he began the official orientation. Both boys straightened up, firmly gripping the crisp papers they were preparing for the flow. A focused silence fell over the hall as the recruits entered and immersed themselves in the academy's regulations and schedules. From the front to the back rows, every student seemed glued to the documents, trying to absorb the complex rules that would define their lives for the foreseeable future. Raising one finger to emphasize what was said, the teacher's face sharply changed. He became stern. Speaking a final, unconditional order, he thundered, "Private duels on the academy grounds are strictly forbidden. This rule is to maintain the fragile peace among different students." When the drawn-out explanation finally ended, he dismissed the class and ordered everyone to proceed to their assigned dormitories for further instructions. Marcus sighed with relief, admitted that he had already switched off somewhere halfway through the lecture, but his mood quickly lifted as soon as he realized both he and Leon were housed in the same building. He almost trembled with excitement, pointing to the exit and urging his friend to hurry so they could make it. They wanted to see their new home. Leon gave a brief, sincere smile. The weight of his previous worries momentarily receded under the pressure of his companion's infectious energy. He stretched his hands behind his head and let out an exhausted sigh as soon as they approached their new home. Nearby, Leon adjusted his bag, his face showing both fatigue and curiosity about what awaited ahead. Their expectations shattered as soon as they finally stood before the dormitory, a half-ruined estate devoured by climbing vines, which looked more like a ghostly wall than a place for students. Marcus froze, examining this dilapidated building, unable to understand whether they had turned the wrong way, straight into a nightmare. With trembling, Leon reached forward and pushed the heavy wooden door. It creaked on rusty hinges. He froze tensely, half expecting a ghost to crawl out of the dark entrance passage. But inside, logic broke down. A stunningly luxurious hall opened up, bathed in light with polished marble and a shimmering chandelier. The two brothers froze in the doorway, their jaws dropped at the incredible contrast between the external dilapidated decay and the internal radiance. While they tried to comprehend what they saw, a tall figure appeared behind them, remaining unnoticed until he spoke. Marcus flinched and snapped his gaze forward, turning to see a fit senior student wearing glasses. He explained that this illusion was the work of powerful magic. The stranger did not wait for introductions. He lunged at the boy, grabbed him by the shoulders, burst into loud laughter, and welcomed the new students. His sudden burst of energy overwhelmed both Leon and Marcus, completely throwing them off balance. He leaned closer and whispered that the deceptive appearance was his idea, made as a lesson: never judge something solely by its looks. The irony of the situation did not escape him, and he was clearly proud of the confusion he himself had created. When the young man finally stepped back, giving him some space, he officially introduced himself: Quentin Walls, supervisor of the South Dormitory. A sharp gleam in his eyes and a confident smile, he greeted them again, making it clear their new life was beginning. He gestured toward the upper floors and ordered the boys to unpack their things before going to the dining hall, where a ceremonial banquet with a grand reception awaited them. Finally, he waved his hand and disappeared, leaving them to settle in and prepare for the evening. Having headed towards the banquet prospect, the younger boy nudges his companion quickly, so as not to miss out. while the elder only mumbles with a slight stupor from the sheer absurdity of their new decorations and has no idea how many more surprises such a dormitory has prepared. Quickly packing up their gear, they enter the noisy dining hall. The air there reeks of conversations among classmates and the rich aroma of a professional kitchen working at full capacity. Their eyes widen as soon as they see the spread. A shiny crowd of delicacies covers the long tables, far more than they imagined for a regular school lunch. The variety and quality of the food momentarily throw them off balance, so they cannot utter a single word. They waste no time, they start digging into the food. Meanwhile, an energetic young man heaps meat onto his plate to the brim, and his more practical friend reminds him, keep a balanced diet and add some vegetables. Yet even he cannot resist these delicious dishes. While they eat, the silver-haired boy asks if there is anyone among the newcomers familiar from home. His friend shakes his head. In their village, he was the only one in his age group with magical talent, so this is truly a complete fresh start. Turning the question back, the boy asks if his companion has already seen anyone familiar, but their conversation is abruptly cut off by a contemptuous voice from behind, such a superior howl like ice on skin. A chubby, arrogant youth named Urton never looms over them. He holds a glass of juice in his hand, and a mocking spark flickers in his eyes when he recognizes the pathetic Heartfilia sitting before him and clearly intending to cause trouble. He trembles with outrage. His face contorts into a mask of fury, and he roars his own name, demanding respect, claiming his noble blood gives him that right. The students around shudder from the shock outburst, while Leon and Marcus watch this spectacle with growing anxiety. With a roar, "Don't gape, commoner," he begins to channel his mana. Bright light bursts from his palms as he prepares a devastating spell. Hearing the impending danger, Leon's gaze sharply widens, and he immediately takes a defensive stance, instincts honed by years of training already kicking in. A huge fireball bursts from the noble's hands, flying straight at the group. But Leon is already ready. He shouts for everyone to retreat and casts a shimmering hexagonal barrier to intercept the explosion. To his surprise, the fireball dissipates into nothing before it even touches his shield. He lowers his defense slightly and realizes his barrier was not the only thing working. Another force intercepted and neutralized the attack mid-flight. From the balcony above them, a sharp voice cuts through the tension. Quentin Walls looks down with a stern face. He loudly declares that discriminatory statements and private duels are strictly prohibited within the academy, and his presence causes everything around to fall silent instantly. Raising his eyes to the supervisor, Leon finally realized the truth about what had happened. It was not just luck. Quentin had cast an exact counterspell to cancel the fireball, so his level of skill stunned the young apprentice. He sharply claps his hands, puts a full stop to the argument, and reminds the gathered students, "Classes start tomorrow." When the crowd begins to disperse, Leon's comrades comment on the strange acquaintances he seems to be making and advise everyone to return to their rooms before it gets too late. The curator holds his gaze. His eyes are fixed on the young man, whose face bears an intriguing smile. He notes that the magical protection shown earlier is usually studied only in the second-year program. He praises the speed and accuracy of the created construct and asks if this skill was entirely self-taught. He then mentions the upcoming practical exam with fireballs scheduled for tomorrow, confidently stating that a student of Leon's level will undoubtedly show excellent results, addressing him formally by surname while the other students silently watch. With a final wave and a wish for a peaceful night, the mysterious mentor disappears at the end of the corridor. His footsteps echo dully as he walks, leaving the boys behind. The farewell words hang in the air with a heavy taste of high expectation. Still await ahead. Marcus watches as the man walks by, teasing and throwing a comment that in such a short time his friend suddenly became very popular among the teachers. Leon remains silent, his gaze fixed on the path ahead, as if already mentally preparing for the trials that await in the morning. He recalls the endless set of spells he learned thanks to the mysterious book in his hands, and his determination hardens. While Marcus shouts with excitement for the morning, Leon already knows, to reach the top of the academy, he must establish his dominance from the very first lesson. Evening settles over academy dormitory, and in one of the rooms, a quiet moment of preparation stretches. Inside, two roommates have already settled into their own routines. One sits at the table completely immersed in studying, while the other, legs crossed, meticulously tends to his blade. Both look satisfied with the quiet company. The researcher finds peace on his pages, and the warrior takes pride in the care of his weapon. The young fencer makes the final, satisfactory stroke with the stone and finishes the work, admiring the sharp blade. His neighbor watches, noting the careful attention given to the task. He explains his father was a mercenary, so from a very young age he honed his sword. A touch of irony, he admits with a smile that he still ended up in a magical academy despite his combat training. His companion agrees, recognizing wisdom in this. Honing both magical skill and physical strength is truly a formidable combination. The fencer only laughs in response. Extra endurance always helps when the situation corners you. Slightly blushing from the compliment, he quickly changes the subject and asks what exactly kept his friends so captivated reading. In response, the student raises a book titled The Difference Between Magic and Marks, saying he took it on the road to the capital and was driven by the need to understand the fundamental differences between these two forces. He suggests lending the book to his roommate, but Marcus politely declines, admitting that books are not his thing. Marcus says that Leon is probably very smart to tackle such dense material, as he himself prefers physical activity, where he feels much more comfortable. When the day comes to an end, the majestic spires of the academy merge with the silence of the night. The last farewell echoes through the corridors as the lights go out and the dormitory sinks into peaceful sleep. The next morning, Grant stands before the class with wild energy and announces, "The time for practical application of magic has finally come." He declares that the day's program will be dedicated to a basic skill aimed shooting. He points into the distance with his hand. The instructor clarifies, the targets are exactly 25 meters away. As an example, he easily and effortlessly lifts a swirling mass of flame in his palm and explains that you need to hit the target with a dense fiery projectile. The students watch closely as he lays out the evaluation criteria and notice, he will look not only at their accuracy. He intends to assess the power, speed, and overall execution of their magic from several angles. He calms the class. The reinforced targets are not so easy to damage, so everyone can unleash their full power without hesitation. Increasing the effective range of their combat magic to 25 meters, he explains that in the future this will open up a lot of tactical possibilities. Step by step, he moved to the designated line of fire and outlined the procedure. Each student steps into the circle as soon as their name is called and waits for the signal to cast their spell. The first is called Marcus. He is completely caught off guard. Although his heart starts pounding wildly from the sudden pressure to be first, he takes a deep breath and prepares to give his all, stepping forward to face the challenge. He lunges forward sharply, releasing a burst of energy, but his fireball only whistles past the target, not leaving even a scratch. Grant meets her with loud laughter. He pats him on the shoulder and praises his speed despite all this mess. He watches as Leon leans over to inspect the target, notices the surface is not even charred, and realizes that the equipment is incredibly durable. He listens as the instructor calls the next student, Heathcliff Dewan, and a wave of recognition rolls through the crowd. The prince is about to take the stage. He watches as the young prince steps into the line of fire, and behind him stretch the excited whispers of classmates that are eager to see his strength. He takes a stance and sharply clasps his palms with a muffled clap to gather mana, and at the very moment the signal to start is given. With an intensely focused gaze, he suddenly thrusts his hands forward, power flared between his palms. His hands release a giant, wildly boiling sphere of dark flame. It halves the targets, and the witnesses are seized with awe at his incredible power. He left the classroom, leaving behind a stunned silence. The air still hung heavy with the trace of his colossal strength. The students exchanged frightened glances, and their whispers filled the lecture hall as they processed the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. The prince calmly returns to the ranks, and among his peers a wave of applause breaks out. He is showered with praise, recognized for the undeniable talent of the royal lineage, while he himself remains impassive, as if indifferent to these accolades. Against the backdrop of still lingering excitement, Marcus turns to his brother, true concern in his eyes. He notes that after such a spectacular performance, it's hard to keep up with him. Marcus offers a few words of support, telling him not to feel pressured. The older boy responds with a gentle, grateful smile. Taking a step forward to take his place in the ranks, the young man closes his eyes for a moment, gathering himself. He exhales slowly, and the noise of the crowd recedes into the background as he fully focuses on what lies ahead. With a steady hand, he extends his index finger toward the target, movements precise, without any hesitation. At the tip of his finger, energy begins to coalesce into a dense, concentrated vortex, and Instructor Grant sharply shifts his gaze alert with curiosity. Unlike the huge flashes just now, here everything was compact and focused, painfully so to the eyes. The surrounding students begin whispering again, feeling a strange pressure coming from him, even though there is no loud spectacle. They will openly speculate whether this quiet contender has something more than meets the eye, their skepticism clashing with an increasingly strong premonition. Then with a quiet, barely perceptible sound, the gathered energy spills out and a tiny cloud of smoke is born, rising in a column, sharply and absurdly contrasting with the power he just emitted. He stands calmly until the silence of the training ground is shattered by Darren's mocking laughter. The confident noble snorts at the pitiful spectacle, calls it a complete failure, and brands it a disgrace. The other students whisper confused, not understanding what they have just. Despite the insults, the truth about the technology was much more sophisticated. He compressed a fireball the size of a small candy, launching it with a speed and force that surpassed all others' attempts. The result was indisputable. A perfectly clean hole pierced the very center of the target. Seeing with what precision the blow was struck, the dark-haired nobleman clenches his teeth and bursts into a dull, silent rage. The thought that some commoner could surpass him is a bitter insult he was not going to swallow. Next to him, the second prince watches with a focused face, his mind racing as he utters the name of the boy who just upended their expectations. Instructor Grant diffuses the tension by stating that based on this performance, Leon took first place in the class. This news throws Darren into a panic, protests, shouts that there is some mistake, and cannot accept that the prince was overshadowed. While the class erupts in a cacophony of demands, explain, Marcus enthusiastically encourages his friend to victory, and Leon remains in the very epicenter, his calm nature sharply contrasting with the surrounding chaos. Ultimately, he presents his philosophy, noting that the effectiveness of magic changes radically depending on a person's imagination. Instead of flashy tricks, he focused on the purely practical use of magic as a deadly weapon, and his peers cannot comprehend this idea. He continues the explanation and lays everything out clearly. Compressing the fireball raises its temperature and reduces air resistance. Combining heat and speed, he transforms these things into pure, concentrated power. The explanation impresses Marcus, although the boy admits he understood only about half. Marcus, relentless, asks where Leon could have gotten such advanced concepts, and Leon hesitates, is not sure if his friend will believe the truth at all. He admits since early childhood he has regularly been visited by the same dream. In it, he wanders through a huge Western-style mansion, and everywhere he goes alone, only with a small black cat. In that library of dream drama, he came across many volumes of forbidden arcana. Night after night, he studied and honed everything until his magical reserves were completely exhausted. The exact location of the estate remains a mystery, but the cat was always nearby, that gave him a strange sense of calm. This revelation throws Marcus into a state of pure delight. The idea of gaining power through dreams seems incredibly heroic to him. Leon, a little embarrassed by such a stormy reaction, suggests simply forgetting that he said it because he fears this is already too fanciful. And as soon as he sees how his friend truly accepts him, a faint smile appears on his face. He admits he had never told anyone this secretand in Maricia's trust. He finally feels relief. Walking alongside, Marcus also lets it be known that he is interested in Leon's fencing skills, but the conversation is cut off mid-word. From behind, a sharp, demanding voice thunders, ordering them to stop and pay attention. This is Darren Lowe, his face twisted with contemptuous confidence. He snarled at the silver-haired upstart and declared that Leon was too arrogant, and in his time, he was taught a lesson in humility. He stands motionless, as Leon calmly suggests, reminding him of the Academy's strict prohibition on duels between students, and asks if he even realizes the rules he is about to break. The brazen young man only snorts contemptuously in response to the warning. A mocking smile spreads across his face as he asks if Leon is simply paralyzed by fear. Leon does not utter a word, staring with a steady and unyielding gaze despite the provocations. Realizing the inevitability of the clash, he turns to Marcus and orders him to go back to the classroom on his own, promising to settle everything quickly. Marcus remains watching, pure panic, and his voice breaks into a mad scream of disbelief as his friend prepares to confront the offender. Leon and Darren make their way through the thickets. Leon freezes, his eyes widen sharply as he begins to inquire where they are heading. They emerge from the trees and see they stand before a huge stone structure. Above the entrance hangs a noticeable sign that gives the building the name of the arena. The ornate symbols on the plaque leave no doubt they have already reached the place of the upcoming confrontation. Taking a step inside, they immediately encounter a spectacle, a huge tiered stadium. Darren explains that although the space is used for regular lessons, its true purpose is to be an arena where mages settle disputes. He points to the markings on the stone floor and orders Leon to take his place behind the white line. After that, he explains, if they turn this into an official duel, they can avoid consequences for an unauthorized one-on-one fight. He is interrupted by a sharp sound from the entrance. Leon is thrown off balance and spins around sharply. Darren calmly notes, for the duel to be considered formal and legal, a witness is required. Quentin Wall steps into the light, a playful but sharp spark flickers in his eyes behind his glasses. He throws Leon a fake apologetic smile and announces that he will be the one to oversee the proceedings. He steps back, leaving space for the duelists, and Leon watches as Darren goes to the starting line. The young mage suddenly understands everything. He begins to piece the puzzle together and concludes, most likely, Gethcliff was the one who organized this confrontation from start to finish. He stands between the two fighters and his voice carries across the arena as he reads the terms of the fight. He orders them to take their places on the white lines and explains, victory will only be declared when one of them is forced to surrender. While the witness prepares to give the signal, his sharp gaze catches a sudden movement. Before they could say begin, a fierce explosion of magical energy bursts from his mouth, and the silence of the arena shatters into pieces. The young mage is completely thrown off by the treacherous first move. He is violently thrown backward by the blow as he struggles to comprehend the blatant disregard for the rules of combat. As he convulsively tries to stand, the overseer only contemptuously shakes his head and grins, feigning misunderstanding as if the boy missed his move. Raising his eyes through the dust, the student in worn uniform loses heart and realizes the whole performance is a farce, staged by those who consider themselves above the law. He always knew the academy is a place of deeply rooted prejudice, so he was prepared for a certain level of hostility. But the outright cowardice of these so-called nobles who take pleasure in such vile tricks is more pitiful than he could have imagined. He is overwhelmed by a wave of self-reproach for having shown them even a little respect. To the surprise of his attacker, the boy slowly gets to his feet, shaking off the dust as if the previous explosion was just a minor inconvenience. His endurance sends a wave of anxiety through the opponent. The smug expression quickly fades and changes to confused, irritated disbelief. With cold, impassive concentration, he looks straight into the opponent's eyes. His silence frightens more than any boasting. Enraged by this absence of fear, the dark-haired student Gralshi's face contorts as he prepares to unleash an even more devastating blow. He remains unbreakable as the air thickens under the overwhelming weight, and behind him appears a colossal phantom dragon. The scale of the summoned creature stretches the very arena, and its radiant eyes and torn scales radiate a power that instantly pins everyone in place. He stands amid the swirling force of his own creation. A huge ethereal dragon looms over the opponent like a god of destruction. Darren, frozen with horror at the scale of the magic, can only freeze and stare upward, unable to believe his eyes. Thoughts whirl wildly as impossible power rises before him. While he holds this stunning presence, the second prince on the side watches everything, and thoughts involuntarily return to that unbreakable pride that once lived in him in his royal blood. He came to the academy with the highest, scornfully confident that he would keep his place at the very top of the hierarchy. He remembered how that confidence was shattered to pieces as soon as some commoner Leon Hartfully began consistently overtaking him. For a member of the royal family, the bitter reality of being overshadowed by someone of low birth was a bitterness almost unbearable. Now, as he watches this spectacle, the prince has to acknowledge the chasm that has opened between them. Leon's raw power is not just stronger, it exists on a completely different plane than anything he or Darren could ever achieve. The stranger Darren below him is gripped by fear. He shudders and recoils, and his voice trembles as he calls his opponent a monster. In his eyes, the figure before the dragon phantom is no longer just a classmate, he is a real demon. He is not the only one stunned by this revelation. The prince freezes, staring at the young man with white streaks, and the pieces finally come together into one picture. He whispers the name of the legend, realizing the boy before him is none other than the white devil, Faria. Thunder rumbles in the air as the strong magical pressure begins to stabilize, and the earth itself trembles from the residual energy of the summit. Spectators freeze, caught off guard by a trail of merciless dissatisfaction. Stepping forward and breaking the deafening silence, the prince declares that he invokes his royal authority to address the crowd, solemnly proclaiming that the clash was not merely a fight but a lawful, formal duel, and he stakes the honor of the name of the one who acted on his word. He stands firm, explaining, the duel was without permission, but the magic was applied under close supervision. He says that Leon's spell, Fire Dragon, though it looks formidable, does not have the power to truly cause harm. It is only a demonstration of strength before Diren and before himself. Stopping to think about what happened, he feels the duty pressing on his chest. He is about to burst out a scream of anger and helplessness, but he is a member of the royal family, so he must take responsibility for his own failures, even if he has to admit defeat before a commoner. Turning to the teacher, he asks to be punished himself for allowing the unauthorized duel to take place. Grant listens with a grim face, acknowledging the full weight of the fact that a royal student found himself in such a story so early in the semester. Seeing the prince take the blame, Leon quickly intervenes and declares, the whole event was not a real duel. He insists that he was just showing off the magic he learned to hear their thoughts, trying to minimize the conflict to protect his classmates. The instructor exhales with relief as if ready to accept this other explanation for the sake of peace. He warns all three of them, from now on they will be more careful because the academy cannot tolerate such reckless displays of power regardless of intent. He fixes a sharp gaze on the young man, calls him by name Heartfilia. He asks the question directly, is there any falsehood in the explanation? Leon solemnly confirms that he is telling the truth. The teacher drives them away, saying that afternoon classes are about to start. He orders them to return to the classroom immediately and not to get into trouble anymore, and with that, he ends the tense confrontation. When they leave, the prince asks why Leon had to go so far to cover them and admits he does not understand the motives of others. Leon just shrugs and says that for him this brief exchange cannot even be called a fight. He steps away and his voice sounds cold as he reminds them he did not come to the academy for no reason. He warns while they can look down on commoners, they should think carefully before interfering with him again. In response, the defeated nobleman Tremblesh is filled with a mixture of humiliation and rage. He shouts after the departing figure and swears that next time they meet, there will be no mercy. The prince silently watches as his companions break down and clenches his hand on his own chest, digesting the encounter. He understands, provoking the newcomer further is a dangerous game, so he decides to keep his distance from him. In a few days at the academy, the atmosphere changed. Students gather around the newly posted exam results. The boy who caused such a commotion now stands at the very top of the ranking, and the prince follows third. In the crowd, a familiar friend calls him loudly and joyfully, eager to share the news. An excited young man, in a burst of energy, accidentally bumps into a female student passing by. He immediately bows, apologizing. His face reddens with embarrassment while the girl looks at him in surprise. As the two friends walk through the corridors, it becomes clear how the duel echoes with every step. Other students recoil as if they were burned. Whispers follow them, fear and rumors about the White Devil. Classmates push each other and shout to keep away because they might be killed. Moreover, he sincerely apologizes for the fact that his presence seems to cause social isolation. However, his companion pays no attention to this. He chews some snack and notes that life is actually calmer when arrogant nobles simply decide to ignore them. The conversation abruptly shifts as soon as the name Farrell is mentioned, and the boy is immediately overwhelmed with complete astonishment. His friend freezes, looks at him with disbelief, and wonders how someone in the kingdom could not know such a famous family, and whether his companion really comes from the farthest corners of the rural backwoods. He contemplates the dark legends hanging over his name. In the creation myths, the White Devil Far-Ale is a figure of horror, a creature that brought magic to humanity and then saw it twisted into a tool of destruction. The tales say the devil devoured entire villages, and now parents still use this name as a boogeyman to keep children in line, warning that the monster will swallow them whole if they misbehave. The burden of this legacy overwhelms him. He cannot comprehend whether he truly has any connection to such a monster. Marcus, sensing his despair, tries to lighten the mood. He brushes off these stories as mere superstition and asks not to take the old tales to heart. He muses aloud whether victory over the evil mage might make him a champion of justice instead of a villain. Their conversation is interrupted by a young woman with a sharp gaze and red hair, who passes by them, clutching a whole stack of books to her chest. Marcus immediately recognizes her Luisa Nemitria, a classmate whose presence involuntarily commands a certain respect. She is undoubtedly stunning, but Marcus notices her detached manner keeps people at a distance. Leon recalls her performance. She secured second place in the practical exams right behind him. This remark prompts Marcus to tease Leon, suggesting that a girl with such a sharp character is exactly his type. Leon vehemently denies it, stumbling over his words. As they continued walking, the conversation turned to her past. Although she holds a high rank, she comes from a lower noble family and was assigned the third category of the Dree class. When she passed by, she cast a brief, icy tense glance over her shoulder. Her face revealed nothing, but it was composed and focused. Her persistent, piercing gaze left him with a creepy feeling, as if she was constantly watching him. Marcus remains skeptical. He says maybe it's just a figment of his imagination or a misunderstanding due to her naturally stern expression. He notices her gaze, though penetrating, does not carry superiority, the kind he often felt from others like Heathcliff or Darren. And though she is noble, it seems she does not look down on him with the same arrogance that has become so common within the academy walls. His companion finally throws up his hands, deciding it's pointless to bother himself. It only drains energy. He quickly switches to the next lesson. Youthful enthusiasm returns, and he shares how much he was looking forward to the upcoming class. He leans forward in his chair as the instructor stands before the class, his voice sounding stern and authoritative. The man admits the newcomers should have already settled into their new life, so along with the habit comes a new challenge. He announces that their next goal is none other than mastering the art of flight, a basic but extremely demanding skill for every future mage. He explains this privilege is extremely significant because local laws strictly limit the use of flight magic to avoid accidents caused by those who cannot maintain control. But for these students, turning 15 and entering the academy becomes a turning point. The restrictions are finally lifted, granting them a freedom that almost no one else in the kingdom has. With joy he came to realize they are now allowed to rise into the sky. The young man can barely contain his excitement when the instructor adds, "At the end of the week there will be an official test of this new skill and demands everyone to train diligently, until then to be ready for evaluation." His first joy fades as soon as the lesson ends and the instructor leaves with a barely noticeable smile. Leon eagerly calls them to move to the yard and start practice immediately. But Marcus is gripped by a troubling sense of anxiety, cannot understand whether the teacher's confident face means that this task is much scarier than it initially seemed. Marcus notices Leon's excitement. Just mention magic and his eyes light up. Leon can't wait, so he urges his friend to move faster, his joy almost overflowing as they walk through the academy grounds. He stops and begins to concentrate, calibrating the sensation of weightlessness with his thoughts. He long admired arcane arts and even once tried unsuccessfully, so now he imagines being lifted and carried into the sky, finally ready to take on the spell he has replayed in his mind so many times. Suddenly his feet lift off the ground and he gasps in genuine shock as he begins to hover. Marcus watches, holding his breath, and shouts with joy his friend is successfully defying gravity for the first time, and this victory seems almost too incredible to be true. But his first victory lasts only briefly. He loses balance and wildly flails in the air. Panic sets in as soon as he realizes he has no control over the fall, and Marcus shouts with concern while watching his friend try to stay on his feet. He is caught at the very last moment. The landing is clumsy but safe in Marcus's hands. Although he shakes a little after the sharp fall, he gives a guilty smile and thanks his comrade for the quick rescue, and Marcus breathes a sigh of relief. Not wanting to give up, he tries once more to land on his feet, but again he tumbles down. Maintaining a stable altitude proves much harder than the initial ascent, so it ends with another ugly, chaotic landing. Seeing his struggle, Marcus decides to try himself. He thinks, the process looks quite simple if you stay low. To his own surprise, he actually rises from the ground with relative ease and realizes that this trick may not be as difficult as Leon described. Both hang in the air and poke at each other as realization hits them simultaneously. This was not the smooth escape they had imagined. They are just swaying in place, suddenly understanding. What they are showing is by no means true mastery, but ordinary basic levitation. He looked around at the other students and noticed many of them stumbled over the same obstacle. Taking off into the air was one thing, but true control of movement remained out of reach for most. He pondered for a long time over the missing piece of the puzzle, thinking the secret was in balance, precise control, or maybe something more fundamental. Suddenly, an epiphany struck his thoughts and he suggested they seek out a specific person known for their experience. Two boys approached their senior, bowed deeply, and solemnly asked him for guidance. They hoped his experience would provide the breakthrough they so lacked to advance their mastery. Quentin greeted them with a binding smile but immediately dashed their hopes. He explained that although he understood their plight, freshmen were strictly forbidden from directly helping or giving advice regarding the difficulties of flight match. He reached out without ceremony and remarked that the clear sky made this day perfect for training such magic. Remembering the upcoming dormitory residence meeting, he encouraged them not to give up on their efforts and only then prepared to leave. The senior easily leapt into the air, smiling as he said goodbye to the juniors and disappeared from sight. They froze in stunned silence, trying to make sense of the brief and mysterious encounter. The sudden departure momentarily pinned them in place. They could not comprehend what it had been. Marcus let out a tired sigh, complaining that they had gained nothing from the conversation. Leon, however, remained thoughtful. He felt that the seemingly simple words of the seniors might hide a clue to guide them. Extremely excited, he tells Marcus about his breakthrough, actively gesturing to explain his idea. He had already realized flight was not just hovering. It was something like the trajectory of an arrow just released from a bow. This difference, he believed, was exactly what they had been missing. Marcus pondered this and suddenly understood. Their senior's refusal was not an empty riddle but a hidden hint. By forcing them to find the answer themselves through intuition and practice, Quentin taught in a way that truly imprinted on memory. With his enthusiasm, a spark confidently ignited. The young mage raced down the corridor, urging his companion not to fall behind. Marcus struggled to keep up, breaking from the path to catch the sharp surge of energy as they ran toward the training grounds. From outside, he pointed to a distant tree and drew a simple flight route: fly straight to the target, make a left bank, and return to their starting position. Without a single pause, he bursts into the air. A splash of magic lifts and propels him forward. Triumphant, he screams in response as soon as he manages to take off, while Marcus remains behind, watching from the ground. But the excitement instantly turns to panic as he realizes he is flying straight into a thicket of leaves. Marcus shouts a warning look ahead, but he cannot turn. His body seems fixed in one sudden lunge forward. The flight ends with a sharp, dizzying impact. He shakes, stars flashing before his eyes. Marcus rushes to help, half relieved, half irritated. He scolds him for his usual recklessness and lack of foresight. Pressing against the base of the tree, he shares his latest insight. He can take off but cannot change course in the air. He warns Marcus, for now they can only fly in a perfectly straight line. He tries again to take flight, shouting the command to ascend, but a sudden surge of power spins him into an uncontrollable spiral. Marcus watches from the side, doubting whether it is even possible to bank or turn at such speed while moving. Once steady on his feet, he leans against the tree and reflects on exactly how their plan failed. He understands, moving in a straight line is easy, but the moment you shift weight or change trajectory, balance immediately collapses. So it seems they are missing something fundamental, not just strength and focus. Exhausting solo training eventually gives way to formal daytime lessons. Grant gathers students on the training field. He orders them to split into groups of 4 and gives an exercise in control, competing for possession of a floating ball clump. They must use only their magical power. He is still shaking from the physical toll of his daytime experiments. He struggles to stay on his feet, his eyes stick shut from exhaustion. Yet despite the fatigue, he easily manipulates the mana around the practice sword, and Marcus truly watches, impressed by his friend's natural talent. Nearby, a student named Odd MacDonald lunges at the ball with desperate force, but it slips through his magical grip. Breathing heavily, he admits, although he placed 5th in the entrance exams, the difference between his abilities and the refined control of the first-year top scorer is astonishingly large. Joining the conversation, Nina Lane struggles to catch her breath. Her face is flushed with tension as she praises their striking skill. Marcus offers a modest smile, hinting that magic is simply the one and only field where they truly shine. He watches the pair closely, noticing the absence of arrogance in their behavior. He finds it strange that these two, despite noble origins, treat commoners with such genuine warmth and respect, revealing themselves as part of a more moderate and accessible faction within the Academy's social hierarchy. As the exercise continues, he thinks, both Odd and Nina passed the entrance exams and entered the class long before him and Marcus. This thought sparks new curiosity. If they have been training here longer, perhaps they have already mastered those flight secrets he is so desperately trying to uncover. He watches as Nina excitedly suggests everyone practice together. A strange bell rings out abruptly, and he admits that they had also hoped to ask the same because they too are eager to improve control over their mana. Later, when the class has already ended, the group enters a conversation about all the difficulties of flight. Leon notices none of them have truly mastered it. Odd explains that they can either hover or move in a straight line, but as soon as they are in the air, they completely lose freedom of movement. This makes Marcus realize, if even these two struggle so much, the secret of flight is not just in raw power. They spend the next hours on persistent training, each student pouring all their concentration into mana control spheres. Continuing their attempts until the sun begins to set, Leon notices how much time has already passed. He feels their technique still fundamentally lacks something. Deciding it's better to rest, he suggests they return and resume attempts the next day. Returning to the safety of their dormitory, Marcus suddenly sobs out of frustration and declares that he cannot concentrate because he is starving. Leon freezes, reminding his brother that he already took 4 servings at dinner. Marcus replies, "The brain, when processing magic, depletes energy faster than anything else." Then he reveals secret reserves of treats he bought at the Academy store precisely for moments like this. Smiling broadly, he tosses a piece into the air and catches it with his mouth, pleased with his foresight. The older brother remains staring in complete stupor while Marcus continues eating. When asked how he can still fit more, Marcus just shrugs and says, "When hungry you eat." Their light moment is cut short by the realization that curfew has already passed. Leon Gurley tells Marcus to turn off the light so they can get enough sleep before another long day of training. He slowly sank into a deep sleep, and his thoughts returned to a memory from long ago. That day, a strange black mass crawled out of a small box, constantly changing until it finally took the form of a small cat. In childhood, he gave this mysterious creature a name, Mozo. In this dreamlike landscape, the only place they could still meet, and the creature prowled through the familiar outlines of his childhood room. It moved with unnatural grace, like a shadow come to life. With a glow on his face, a bright and youthful smile, the boy loudly declared that the cat was his most precious friend. Their bond ignited immediately and reached a depth beyond the ordinary. He understood his current mastery of magic became possible only through endless hours of training alongside Shadowcat. Warmly greeting the creature, he asked how it felt that very day. This creature responded with playful energy. It jumped over stacks of books, darted around the room, and finally settled nearby while he studied. Her presence constantly gave him a feeling of calm and inspiration. He laughed at her antics. He praised both the creature and his brother Mark, calling them geniuses. He whispered his sincere thank you to the silent partner. But the dream began to fade, and he woke up in his dorm room. The warmth of the memory still lingered, but instead, sharp pangs of hunger and regret cut through him. When the sun rose over the academy, the students set off on their daily way to classes. Amid the hustle and bustle through the morning noise, a question suddenly rang out. Had anyone found a solution overnight? The answer came as a chorus of disappointment. Nina apologized, admitting that she had nothing but emptiness, while Marcus confessed, although he had stayed up late, no thought had come to mind. Odd quietly supported him, saying that his own attempts had also yielded nothing, so the problem with flight magic remained as daunting as before. He returns to his comrades, a mischievous spark playing in his eyes, and declares that he just had a new idea. A confident smirk, and he asks them to watch closely, hinting that perhaps he finally cracked the code to their flight problem. In a moment, he begins to rise his body as if defying gravity, smoothly lifting into the air. Joyful laughter bursts from him as he hovers above the ground. The triumphant expression on his face clearly shows that the levitation magic succeeded. Not content with mere hovering, he surged forward, carving a path through the sky like a bird in flight. He glides with incredible speed and precise control, his cloak billowing behind him as he conquers the air currents. After the impressive performance, he descends back to the ground, softly landing before his stunned friends. Leon and Nina can only freeze silently. Their faces, as if carved by pure shock, gaze at what just happened in their eyes. The silence is instantly broken by their excitement. Shouts ring out as they exclaim in awe about his incredible flight. He stands before them, basking in the praise, and from his very posture radiates a sense of accomplishment. As the dust settles after landing, the group gathers around him, all eager for an explanation. The weight of his victory hangs in the air, a sharp contrast to the frustration that had gripped them just a minute before. He explains his breakthrough with indifferent, casual nonchalance, saying the key was simple: eat whenever hunger struck. Leon is genuinely impressed by this unusual logic, while Nina remains thoughtful, trying to understand how such a simple physical need could transform into complex magic. Leon's eyes widen as he grasps what was said. Suddenly, the explanation holds some strange meaning, and Nina continues to look on, mixing confusion with skepticism. The mystery of his success does not vanish even in the moment of celebrating this unexpected victory. He continues the explanation and says that it seems Marcus has also already grasped the truth. Then he clarifies, the secret of their success is not some single trick, but the layering of several magical effects at once. The whole trick is that flight is not one spell but a combination of several different ones: a jump to take off, a spell for turning, one to draw an arc through the air, and another for controlled landing. It is a complex sequence of many magical components that work perfectly in unison. Inspired by this analysis, Nina and Odd enthusiastically try it out and realize, once you understand the mechanism, execution becomes simple. By the end of the day, all four are already mastering the art of flight, and when the weekend comes, an official flight test starts for the entire class. Other students also prove their skill. They fly through the air with newly found grace. Darren Lowe and Heathcliff Dewin perform their maneuvers flawlessly, earning passing scores as they glide across the training ground. Grant is completely impressed by the skill. He announces, clapping his hands, that all 20 students of the isekai class have passed the test, a rare and wonderful achievement that speaks to the talent of the whole group. With the test behind them, the guys arrange a triumphant fist bump. Their friendship grows stronger from shared success. The teacher calls them. It's time to return to class. A new, even more demanding challenge awaits. Returning to their desks, they feel the atmosphere change as the instructor begins handing out the next assignment. He sharply tosses the papers onto the desks with a single wrist flick, and Leon catches his looking at the new work, his eyes filled with both curiosity and a wave of anticipation. The teacher's face suddenly becomes deathly serious, his eyes wide open, and his gaze so intense there's nowhere to escape. He announces the next stage of their Traininga field practical trip, where they will work on the laws of magic in the outside world, far beyond the safety of the academy walls. He stands firmly before the class, looming over the desk, and continues the lecture. He says, they have already figured out that flight is a fusion of different magics, but true mastery requires technical skill to apply each individual spell with absolute precision. While the students listen, the prince lowers his gaze to the papers in his hands, absorbing the weight of the instructor's words. The voice continues to emphasize, true ability is measured by the capacity to demonstrate this level of mastery regardless of circumstances or pressure. Hearing this, the young genius sharply exhales a surprised cry, wide open, his gaze showing both shock and anticipation. The instructor explains, the next field practice is essentially a test of their true abilities, an unexpected exam that throws everyone off balance. He is still noticeably trembling with excitement but also shining with delight. His face flushes with the tension of the upcoming trial. Somewhere far away, the teacher gives a final warning: do not lower vigilance and keep focus on daily lessons while preparing for the tests that await them outside. Grant stands before the class and his voice thunders as he announces the start of the magical field training. The students glance toward where he is looking. The program's workload finally reaches them. They will soon head into the field for practical experience. He watches the students' reactions, especially Nina's horror as she stammers about the dangers of monsters and the possibility of being maimed. Her anxiety grows as soon as she recalls rumors of the disaster awaiting them beyond the academy walls. Imagination spirals with fear. They are connected by Marcus. He tries to lighten the mood, but the tension does not ease until a familiar, mischievous voice cuts into their conversation. Quentin leans forward, surprising the whole group as they discuss the logistics of their first field assignment and the herb gathering they expect to perform. He suggests a trip to a local shop he often visits, explaining that during the practical exam, students are allowed to bring their own tools and materials. His eyes shine both with friendly intent and his usual playful nature as he offers to guide them to the best equipment available in the city. As they walk through the noisy academy courtyard, he explains that the senior students' schedule is unpredictable. Third-year students never know when their next trial will begin. He encourages the juniors use the free time before the training truly starts. She continues to tremble, hiding behind friends because the presence of the senior student pressures her. Leon gently reproaches the senior. His sudden appearance and tense energy only intensify the girl's fear, but he understands Quentin means no harm. He softens his tone a bit and offers reassuring words. Instructors will be nearby to handle any real danger. He reminds them that despite the harshness of the training, everything happens in a state of maximum combat readiness so that everyone is safe during their time in the field. He leads them forward with a dramatic gesture, stopping before a grand building with arched windows and heavy, richly decorated doors. Confidently smiling, he announces their arrival and praises this luxurious location as his very first recommended place for their training needs. He notices Leon lingering near the nearest window and quickly corrects him, pointing to a much smaller hidden entrance. In his eyes a predatory spark, he insists the real shop is hidden just nearby, around the corner, away from the main facade. He leads them to a rotten shop, shrouded in shadows and mystery against the backdrop of the surrounding luxury. It looks completely different. A small, worn sign, "Coco," hangs precariously, and the building exudes a creepy, gloomy energy causing the students to freeze at the threshold. He squeezes through the door into a cramped interior where cobwebs hang like curtains and dust motes dance in the dim light. The students, stunned by the dilapidated decor and piles of junk, gape in disbelief, while he casually informs them he will find the shopkeeper now. He waves his hand toward the cluttered shelves, urging the skeptical group to look at what is available while they wait. The students freeze. Confusion and growing fear mix on their faces as they finally realize this is exactly where they are expected to buy their supplies. He watches as, upon closer inspection of the warehouse, their worst fears are confirmed. Nina is overcome by a coughing fit from the thick dust, while Odd finds out that the magic wands are fragile and cracked, and the potion bottles are either broken or leaking, spilling their contents. He and his companions are suddenly met by the shop owner, a woman named Rita. She explodes with rage, furiously scolding them, especially Leon, for nearly causing a catastrophic reaction when he used the phase elixir glass on his regular broom. She warns, all damage will turn into a debt they will never be able to repay. While the boys babble apologies, Quentin steps forward, intervening and pressuring the shopkeeper to be lenient, seeing the student at least recognize the magical properties of the game. Rita remains unimpressed, snorting that he is still far from mastery. The tension crackles and crumbles as a wave of light covers the room. Nina gasps for air. Quentin explains, the neglected appearance of the shop was only projection magic, a precise illusion meant to hide its true nature from the unworthy. When the curtain is lifted, the team sees the shop as it really is, flawless, neatly organized. They understand, Quentin's choice of this neglected shop was a deliberate test of their perception. The realization impresses them, yet at the same time slightly irritates its meaning. With a smile, he admits that it was just a small warm-up for their future field research. Things are rarely as they seem there. Now, seeing clearly, the students are amazed. Shelves full of rare magical ingredients and artifacts made by legendary mages. And just as Leon examines the tax price, Auk quickly turns to shock at the price tag. He gasps at the insane pricey hundreds of giles for one item, while Rita firmly states she will not budge on the price for a whole bunch of brats. Despite the price, his attention is caught by a single item and he cautiously asks how much it costs. As soon as the shopkeeper turns to face him, a spark of recognition flashes between them and the air freezes for a moment. She shatters the silence with an explosion of rage. Her face contorts and she yells at Leon. She demands that he never say her name so familiarly, brands him a coward and a scoundrel, and the boy, who was just young moments ago, trembles from her sudden personal venom. She continues her tirade. Her voice trembles with rage and betrayal, while Brandon buries himself somewhere and wraps himself up plaintively. Leon can only stare back in shock and silence, unable to comprehend how deep her sudden hostility is and why she speaks to him with such venom, insisting that he has no right to address him in that way. Suddenly she is cut off by a cheerful, ringing remark through the tension. A freshman, no, a second-year student, approaches and, playfully scolding her friend for starting a fight, interrupts her. The newcomer tries to diffuse the explosive mood, but Kramer is still boiling with anger. She continues not to take her eyes off the boy and clearly despises him. The newcomer introduces herself as Lodi Haler. A bright smile and energetic demeanor sharply contrast with the heavy atmosphere. She recognizes the boy immediately. Flashes in her eyes at meeting the very student who has become the center of all the academy's rumors. She checks if he is really Leon Hartfilia, as they say about him. She, wasting no time, immediately dives into the rumors that are already spreading throughout the entire school. She explains, many believe the shopkeeper's anger is entirely justified. They say he is a fraudulent degenerate. He failed the magical tests and somehow managed to outsmart even the prince in the rankings with a sneaky trick. She recounted a conversation with Ayrton Neverett, who happily painted a grim picture of his roommate. Ayrton insisted that he was nothing more than a piece of trash who went so far as to launch a sudden, unprovoked attack on him right in the safety of their own dormitory. She continues the list of insults, recalls the duel, and claims that even the prince and Darren have to endure his alleged audacity. The fabrication they weave is about a bully who uses his position to silence and intimidate anyone who dares to oppose him. A story that seems to have firmly taken root in the minds of the entire student body. The rumors boil down to a dark portrait of his character, a student who committed fraud to seize first place in the entrance exams and now praises those who look down on him contemptuously. This is a complete distortion of the truth. They paint him as a shadow looming over the academy, and this version of events has gained the most traction. The boy stands at the very center of this storm of accusations, while the second-year student turns to her friend and meets her with a light, sincere laugh. She suggests simply asking him about the stories directly, as if unaware of the weight of the lie she just repeated, while Quentin watches the scene, frozen in quiet contemplation. She tries to negotiate with the group, hinting that perhaps Louisa simply misunderstood the situation. But Louisa stubbornly refuses to give up and says, "It's hard to believe anything else when you've only heard Ayrton's version." She immediately sees a chance to put an end to this and excitedly proposes a solution. Leon should simply show his magic right here and right now. If he demonstrates what he is truly capable of, the rumors will finally be shattered once and for all. The group moves into a more open area, but Leon is still worried about the scale of his spell. She says they might be dangerous. Louisa, still skeptical, demands that he prove everything despite this and forces him to agree to a restrained demonstration. He begins the show, summoning several small but painfully bright balls of flame dancing in the air. He calmly controls them, increasing both their number and strength to demonstrate the precision of his movements. Suddenly, the small tongues of flame blaze into a magnificent, towering phoenix made of pure magical energy. Louisa freezes in shock, her eyes widen as she feels the devastating pressure of his mana and realizes the chasm between their magical mastery. When the fiery bird fades to embers, she barely finds her voice and asks if that was really his full power. Leon calmly admits he held back as much as he could, so Louisa can only marvel at his incredible talent. Briefly ashamed of her former arrogance, she bows low and sincerely apologizes for her behavior and for believing the lies. He accepts her apology with a gentle smile, admitting that he himself regrets losing his temper with her. She sinks to the floor, clutching her head with her hands, sorrowfully scolding her own stubbornness and recalling her mother's warnings about her habit of jumping to conclusions. Leon and Lodi stand nearby. The tension finally recedes, yielding to a quiet sense of determination. She sighs and admits she never thought that commoners and nobility could find a true common ground. Lodi picks up and explains, they really do seek friendship, but the burden of their noble status often becomes a barrier, a misunderstanding that is hard for others to break through. A young noblewoman speaks a humiliating truth. Her family has declined. She lacks the wealth usually associated with her status. She says that because of this, she has to work a side job rare for someone of her rank, and recalls how others once mocked her, calling her the poorest noblewoman from the north. She recalls her childhood, how she first felt her magical ability and what dreams she ignited. Her goal was simple: to become a powerful sorceress to support her parents and bring prosperity to the lands barely holding on. She pursued this dream with relentless training. Her confidence, however, was tested as soon as she stepped into the academy. Despite her efforts, she ended up in second place, lagging behind the top student. The fact that the second prince was in her class only intensified the feeling. Her skills seemed insufficient in comparison. Looking at the boy standing before her, she acknowledges the incredible feat he accomplished by winning first place in the trial exams. She utters his name, Leon Hartfilia, with newfound respect. She understands how much incredible determination he had to endure to surpass everyone else. With a deep bow, she offers sincere apologies for her mistaken sense of justice clouding her judgment and causing him trouble. Genuine relief flashes across her face as she says how glad she is that his true abilities have finally been recognized and appreciated. Lodi meets her with a friendly reaction, and Leon only silently nods in acceptance. The tension finally dissolves into mutual respect instead. She watches as he approaches the counter to finish his business and already manages to shift her thoughts back to the practical needs of her activities. He stood beside Louisa while she carefully selected two small bottles, explaining that although they looked the same, their effects differed slightly. He accepted them, bowed awkwardly, his voice breaking as he expressed sincere thanks. When she returns to him with a soft smile, he is suddenly struck by an epiphany. Her features nearby are striking. Such unexpected closeness takes his breath away, his heart races wildly, and he struggles to restrain himself. This moment of vulnerability does not go unnoticed. Marcus and Lodi immediately start teasing. Marcus, with a flushed face and a mix of jealousy and amusement, shouts that Leon clearly has a crush, and Lodi joins in, blending into the roar of laughter, and Leon feels worse and worse because of it. A playful quarrel continues until Quentin intervenes, clapping his hands to signal that their turn is coming to an end. He suggests wrapping up the romantic gossip and returning, and the whole group follows him as the sun begins to set over their eventful day. Late that night, in the silence and solitude of his dorm room, the young student sits cross-legged on the bed, his full attention fixed on the thick book. Recent events fade into the background. Only one goal remains, the knowledge revealed with each page of the book. The book, a detailed treatise on the art of marks, was a gift from Louisa, a sincere apology for their earlier misunderstandings. It describes the fragile connection between symbols and spells. The emphasis is that a mark works only when it is copied with flawless accuracy. Putting theory into practice, he carefully dips the pen into the ink and begins to draw symbols on a scrap of parchment. Light softly emerges from the paper. The levitation mark activates, and the sheet begins to tremulously rise upward, a small but significant victory in his magical research. After such success, he dares to take a bolder step and reaches for the familiar blade. He reasons that since he is much more accustomed to the weight of a sword than to an ordinary rod, the manipulation sign applied directly to the weapon will be much more effective for his fighting style. He contemplates the nature of magic. Just as tools enhance the quality of a spell, scissors cut paper more easily than bare hands. A familiar sword or book can become a better conduit for mana, and to make his own weapon work even more effectively, he prepares to cast a manipulation sign. In a moment, the task is completed. He shows the newly enchanted weapon with a satisfied smile, and his younger brother looks with wide-open eyes, impressed by the successful use of the complex sign. The younger boy can barely contain his excitement. He shouts that the sword looks incredible and is itching to swing it. Leon immediately intervenes, urging him to calm down and warning that the room is too cramped for such dangerous exercises. With the marked sign, he carefully wraps the handle, securing the enchantments. He firmly decided to bring this enhanced blade to the upcoming practical exercise, confident in the advantage its edge would provide. The later it gets, the louder the talks about the inevitable stand down become. Marcus brushes off the thought of training starting while they sleep and considers the sudden test simply absurd. Despite his brother's recklessness, a feeling of anxiety still smolders in his mind. He recalls Quentin's cryptic warning to keep his ears open and decides it's better to be prepared. To Marcus's surprise, he goes to bed fully dressed, keeping his sword and boots close at hand. When the clock strikes midnight, the dormitory is covered by deep silence. They exchange their last good-night farewells, and the moon hangs over the quiet grounds of the academy until the last lights go out. His rest lasts briefly without any warning. The floor under the bed seems to collapse, and he rapidly falls into a dark, twisted abyss, and the academy trials become reality much earlier than he expected. He found himself sitting on the forest floor. The dark abyss disappeared, giving way to the sun breaking through the dense canopy. Scanning the familiar yet unexpected landscapes, he whispered in surprise, "Is this the true essence of the academy trial?" His heart was pounding wildly, anxiety and excitement mixed as the reality of the situation overwhelmed him. These were his first real field exercises in magic, a trial to overcome to prove his worth. He gathered himself and prepared for everything that awaited ahead in this simulated or distant landscape. Leon stands in a dense magical forest and freezes, marveling at the scale of the transportation magic that brought them here. It feels like a completely different dimension. He shakes his head, wipes away his awe, and realizes he needs to figure out his next step in this foreign terrain. Nearby, a hidden figure barely smiled, whispering an order to remove the spell that kept her invisible. Suddenly, Lodi Gaylor materializes right behind him with a friendly greeting, and he flinches from the surprise. She introduces herself, a second-year student who is to guide them through this street magic practice, appearing as if she emerged from the void. She continues and outlines their goal. They need to obtain 1 silver wing plate of a butterfly and 1 root of Hymeria. Since this is their first practical task, she assures him that everything will be simple and manageable. The freshman later clarifies that the teachers and second-year students are monitoring the area undercover with concealment magic and are ready to intervene if something goes wrong. She adds, they have a 24-hour limit and can request a time extension at any moment. Before disappearing as quickly as she appeared, she says a final word of support, acknowledging that she has high personal expectations for his performance and hopes he will receive the highest grade. He watches her leave and realizes the time announcements will be in her voice. To test the system, he asks how much time is left, and the quick response confirms exactly 24 hours remain. He carefully stepped through the undergrowth, and his thoughts raced wildly as rare specimens he sought flashed in his memory. He recalled, the silver butterfly stayed in wet, swampy areas, while the Hymeria root usually thrived in cold, dry climates. A strange contradiction, but in this magically created world, he understood, such different environments could exist side by side. Preparing to move on, he focused his mana and summoned a protective barrier under his feet to hold the path through the treacherous terrain. He knew he needed to coordinate the magical output with physical endurance, so he headed toward the nearest swamp, hoping to encounter butterflies first. The road seemed long, but his stubbornness paid off as soon as the air became humid and the splashing of water echoed in the trees. With a triumphant shout, he stumbled upon a swamp froze, watching shimmering silver butterflies dance over the murky water. Approaching the dense bushes, he noticed one of the delicate creatures resting on a leaf. Without disturbing the living insect, he crouched down and gathered several abandoned wings scattered on the forest floor, carefully hiding them. It was his first successful collection. He stopped to check how much time was left and with a satisfied smile noted, there were still 21 hours on the clock. The simplicity of his find made him think, maybe he was just lucky he had been transported to a perfect place near his goals. The first task was completed so quickly, and the late hour weighed heavily on his eyelids. He decided to take advantage of this pace, found a sturdy tree, leaned against it, and planned a short nap to restore his strength before the trials that surely awaited ahead in the deep forest. His rest was abruptly interrupted by a rough touch. A hand grabbed his shoulder, and a voice with clear irritation called his name. The darkness in the forest blurred as he convulsively tried to regain consciousness. Urgent demands buzzed in his ears, "Wake up." When his vision finally cleared, he fixed his gaze on the angry face of Darren Lowe, who was clearly displeased with the sight of his opponent sleeping on duty. Darren demanded explanations, asking if this was another of his scams, and warned that this time there would be no leniency. Then he sharply nodded toward Leon, disheveled and in a sloppy uniform. He jerked as cold, foggy swamp water suddenly surged forward, instantly soaking his clothes, and he understood the mechanism of the environment. The water level rises periodically. He looked at his opponent with sincere gratitude and thanked him for the timely signal that saved him from a much worse fate. In response, the dark-haired youth sharply recoiled, with uncharacteristic passion ordered him not to thank so generously and demanded he immediately move away to dry his clothes. Though the words sounded stern, a cheerful, all-knowing smile spread across the boy's face. He sensed hidden anxiety behind this outburst. For now. When they settled on a fallen log to rest, he noticed how exhausted his companion was slouching and asked if the late hour was really hitting him hard. The boy brushed off the thought. He said his sluggishness was just exhaustion, not a need to sleep. Then he gestured toward the water and showed a sleeping dragon half submerged among the water lilies. He explained that it had probably released a sleeping powder from its back, which was the real culprit behind his sudden deep sleep earlier. Considering the danger, he admitted he would definitely have been disqualified if he had remained unconscious while the water rose, and thanked his opponent again. But this only sparked a new defensive tirade. The noble insisted he acted not out of kindness, but to protect his own reputation from disgrace for losing to someone who had fallen in such a pitiful manner. To put an end to the dispute, he focused and manifested a local field of heat and protection to quickly dry their soaked clothes. A sudden wave of hot air confused his companion, and the boy nearby was momentarily speechless at the practical use of such magic. When the moisture evaporated, a heavy silence fell between them. The dark-haired young man shifted his gaze to the ground. His usual arrogance changed to a gloomy, thoughtful restraint. He spoke uncertainly, but finally said and honestly apologized for his previous behavior. He admitted that after their duel his perspective changed, and he understood. His noble origin did not give him the right to look down on others. Accepting defeat both in skill and character, he met the gaze of his former enemy and expressed a deep need to make amends for everything he had done. He clenches his fist tightly, then slowly unclenches his fingers as if his body responds to an inner change. He acknowledges what he truly needs is not status or a high position, but the awareness of his own true strength. Turning his thoughts to the past, he recalls how once Heathcliff was much gentler, perhaps because he lived in the shadow of his brilliant older brother, the first prince. At that time, the prince lacked confidence and was never one to look down on others. But the present tells a very different story, and as a childhood friend who has watched him closely, he senses in the prince a wild, desperate yearning but cannot understand why. Over time, a wall has grown between them, yet he still does not retreat and truly wants to hear what his old friend will say. Breaking the heavy silence with a small, self-deprecating smile, he apologizes for burdening Leon with such personal matters. Noticing that their clothes have finally dried, he suggests they continue on their way. The air becomes fiercely cold as soon as they enter the frigid zone. The sharp climate change throws Leon off balance and makes him shiver. Darren points to a huge stone formation, explains that the Hymeria flowers they are looking for bloom precisely in such wild terrain, and suggests climbing up. Without any pause, the young mage activates flight combat magic and sharply propels himself upward, as if ignited by pure energy. His companion freezes in shocked stupor and shouts a warning about how reckless such a bold maneuver is. Reaching the summit, they see only barren rock, no flowers in sight. The extent of Leon's disappointment makes his companion wonder if his knowledge of the local flora might have been mistaken. Their search is interrupted by a familiar voice. Nina Lane rushes to them, out of breath. She explains that she herself was looking for Hymeria. They are surprised why such brightly red flowers turned out to be so hard to find in this landscape. She admitted that her search also proved fruitless, and she kept wondering if the flowers might bloom somewhere in another hidden corner of the region. Darren agreed. The complete absence of plants on such a perfect cliffside coast seemed deliberate and unnatural, so he decided that further searching here would be a wasted effort. There was no reason to delay. She suggested setting off immediately to look for a new lead. Darren followed her example and noted that the academy seems to like preparing exactly such tangled puzzles for its students to solve. While they were making their way through the rocky terrain, a familiar voice suddenly called out to them. Lodi Haler and her companions appeared from behind the ridge. She dashed forward and blossomed into a radiant smile, clearly relieved and wildly happy that they had finally met Leon and the wild nature itself. She watched as Louise Nemetria cautiously glanced at Darren and demanded an explanation for why Leon was traveling with someone like him. Leon quickly intervened and explained that Darren had helped him before, so Louise finally understood. Their meeting at this border was hardly accidental. She and the others merged into one group, standing close together while they pondered their next move in the twilight. A silver butterfly flew past them, a quiet witness to their increasingly strong alliance. They listened as Darren took the moment to share his theory about the tribunal. The difficulty was supposed to increase as time passed. He explained that in the swampy lands where his team started, the treacherous waters had already taken the flowers loved by silver butterflies, making it impossible to get them. She nodded, adding that something similar had happened in her area. As soon as they gathered the roots of Hymeria, the rest of the flowers wilted and fell into the depths of the ravine, so they were left with only half of what they needed. She finally grasped the true essence of the exercise and understood. The academy wanted them to work together. It was not just about gathering, but about the ability to negotiate and exchange materials with other students who had the missing pieces of the puzzle. She stands next to the group while they discuss the logistical nightmare of the exam. Lodi feels relieved that they found each other. Negotiating with strangers would have taken too much time. The group agrees everyone understands that each probably has some materials, even if they are overpriced. While the conversation continues, the focus shifts to the second prince. When he is hinted that the silver butterfly might have already disappeared from the forest, he jerks sharply. He shouts for everyone to be silent. His voice, pierced with irritation, insists that he already knows that. He angrily strikes the nearest tree with his fist. A sharp curse bursts from his lips. The royal restraint everyone expected vanishes, giving way to wild, ragged rage. Alone with his thoughts, he grits his teeth. The pressure of expectations weighs on him like a stone. He tells himself, this time he must be the best, not allowing even the thought that ordinary people or those he considers beneath his level could surpass him. His thoughts again fled to childhood, a time cast in the shadow of his older brother. While the latter, supported by the people, was being prepared for the throne, he remained searching for his own path, constantly measuring himself against a standard he had not chosen. He believed that magic was his salvation, the only gift neither his father nor brother had. He was confident that once he graduated from the academy with honors, he would finally step out of the shadow and claim the recognition he had earned himself. And the reality of his current situation feels as if heavy cold chains are on him. He realizes what he faced was not even a real struggle. It was a complete collapse of the world he had built for himself. What he was proud of, his magical gift and his royal blood, became the very chains that bound him. His pride swelled until it turned into a burden he could no longer bear. So after meeting Leon, he found himself metaphorically bound and broken. He wipes the sweat from his forehead, and irritation grows as soon as he realizes they have gotten out of the forest. Darren and Quentin trail behind until something in the distance catches his eye. Two figures stand together in the clearing. Seeing the couple, he asks himself whether this is an honest exchange of materials or something more insidious. Behind his back, Darren and Quentin whisper cautiously to each other, and his already fragile temperament is further tormented. The prince's anger reaches its limit. He fiercely snaps at Quentin to immediately go and destroy the materials gathered by the girl. The bespectacled boy flares up with indecision. The prince cuts it off with icy contempt, ordering him to disappear if he cannot be useful. Putting on the mask of royal grace, he approaches the two girls with a teaching smile and asks what they are doing. They immediately recognize him. Their eyes widen as soon as they realize the second prince himself has honored them with his visit. They explained with naive smiles that they were simply exchanging extra materials, even offering to share with him if he lacked anything. Between them lies a delicate butterfly symbol of that peaceful cooperation he so hates. Their peaceful proposal is met with a crumbling facade instead. A pure cold disgust freezes on his face as soon as he raises his hand to them. He snorts disdainfully at their vile behavior, and his voice drips with poison as he prepares to strike. Then he unleashes a barrage of cruel dark magic cuts through the gap, leaving no shred of mercy. But the force of the strike shoots into the girl's sides. Silence and calm shatter in an instant due to the sudden explosive surge. With a mad power blazing in his eyes, he declares, "Those like them have no right to remain within the academy walls." His descent into madness seems complete. His sense of superiority has twisted into destructive rage. He looms over them. His presence presses like a suffocating weight, and the two girls tremble with pure terror. They cling shoulder to shoulder, eyes wide with shock and fear as they realize the abyss they've been pushed into. One gasps sharply, and this shared panic attack echoes in the tense silence. Above the training ground hangs a huge, wildly spinning sphere of destructive energy. Heathcliff stands before it with his back to the audience and coldly declares that there is no place here for others in this academy. He looms over the frightened twin sisters huddled closely together on the ground, their faces paling with fear as they realize the merciless danger they have fallen into. They cry in helplessness while he watches them. On his face is a concentration sharp in the eyes and a brief flash of pity. His hand reaches forward as if he can take the chaos he himself stirred under control. Suddenly, a figure bursts into the fight. Leon throws himself between the twins and the impending explosion. His power flares, and he creates a protective shield that absorbs the impact. He exhales and pure relief leaves him. His hands are still raised after the jerk that stopped the blow. He is simply glad he managed to save from tragedy while the twins sometimes look at him, sometimes look away. His relief is shared by the appearance of Professor Grant. Other students, especially Louisa and Nina, gather around because the teacher's presence restores a semblance of order to the scene. They hold their gazes, Leon steady and resolute, and Heathcliff clearly bewildered, drenched in sweat, his composure completely shattered after the sudden and effective intervention. A little earlier, in another part of the forest, another group of students is celebrating their victory. Having gathered the necessary materials, they are now looking for a place to submit them, unaware of the drama unfolding elsewhere. The students completed the strategy. They split into two separate teams to cover more territory in the forest. They acknowledged that only 2 hours remained until the practical test and agreed to meet again at the boundary line exactly in 1 hour to compare results. When the plan firmly fell into place, the trio Leon, Marcus, and Louisa took off in good spirits, full of determination to start searching for the necessary materials as soon as possible. They quickly dissolve into the dense vegetation, each going their own way to seize a chance for success before the deadline. Wandering alone through the quiet forest, Leon grows increasingly frustrated by the lack of progress. He finds no traces of the needed items. Then suddenly a chill runs through him, freezes in place, and instinct screams danger. The same panic overwhelms his companions as well. A huge, malevolent, magical presence begins to seep into the air. It radiates blatant and irresistible hostility, making the skin numb with cold. He very quickly finds the source of the commotion, Darren. He looks disheveled and desperate. Leon demands explanations, interrogates what he was going to do and why anyone would attack their own classmates during a school exercise. Instead of answering, the arrogant young man sneers contemptuously and brushes off Leon and his friends, calling them nothing but disgraced former nobles and worthless commoners who deserve to be wiped off the face of the earth. When the situation rapidly escalates to violence, Louisa cries out fearfully, and Professor Grant watches from the darkness along with Quentin. Although the supervisor notices the danger, the professor decides to stay a moment longer, is ready to intervene only when the conflict completely gets out of control. He watches from the shadows as the young swordsman leaps into the air and pulls his blade behind him desperately, to close the distance between himself and the arrogant nobleman. The boy struggles with the oppressive weight of enemy magic and, grimacing, realizes only his strength will not break this deadlock. Suddenly, when Marcus arrives, a familiar voice sounds. He apologizes for the delay, then triggers a supportive energy flash that crashes into the magical barrier with a blast. He provides the necessary cover and Leon gets the chance to call Louise. She steps forward confidently, her fingers tremble from the fleeting spark as she prepares to fire her own contribution. She tears the space with a sudden violent splash of crystal shards. A torn wall of frost spills around Darren and for a moment hides him from view. The noble deer flinches backward, its face twisted into a mask of distrust and rage. Mere mortals dared to stand against him, and with such coordinated force at that. Watching him from afar, Quentin leans toward his colleague and whispers that the fight is rapidly getting out of control. Perhaps it's time for the faculty to intervene. He waits for an answer, but the professor does not respond. His eyes are glued to the field as he thinks about how the Heartfilia group will finally end the clash, while meanwhile Leon bursts forward sharply, his body in the rays of the strengthening spell. He watches as Leon approaches at an astonishing speed, and Darren is completely bewildered. The immense speed leaves the opponent not a second to react. Through this sudden closeness, Marcus breaks into a scream of alarm. He is frightened by the danger of such magic at too close a distance. But the young mage does not look away. His hand reaches forward to directly touch Darren's forehead. With a precise strike, Leon knocks the opponent off his feet. He flies backward, and the boy immediately sinks to the ground, consciousness fading in a moment. He caught the boy who was falling and calmed his comrades. There is no need to worry, he simply cast a simple hypnotic spell to peacefully stop the fight. Quentin approaches them and thanks them for their impressive restraint. The overseer tousled Leon's hair, praising him for neutralizing the threat without resorting to destructive offensive magic. Nearby, the young twins, Lena and Marcia, huddled together, still trembling after what they had experienced. As the tension begins to subside, a large instructor approaches the group, hand on his chest. He sincerely apologizes for being late and for the fear they had to endure. Then he turns his attention to the twins and asks if they want to withdraw from the practical exercise under these circumstances, but they reluctantly do not give up. They hold their ground and insist they will continue until the task is completed. Acknowledging their determination, he turns his attention to the unconscious Githcliff and states that the boy suffered a mental breakdown and is officially suspended from the exam, after which he lifts him and takes him away. Louisa watches as Githcliff leaves with Leon and the twins, and worry darkens her gaze. She quietly whispers the prince's name. Her heart is heavy from the mental strain he apparently endured. As soon as they move, the group realizes they stayed too long in one place. It is time to gather their strength and head to the designated meeting point. Returning to the others, Odd is noticeably surprised. He listens carefully to the report about the recent chaos. Nina anxiously asks if all three of them are really unharmed, while Quentin stands aside silently thinking. His keen gaze scans the entire company. Then he asks if they found anything useful during their separation. Quentin mentions Gethiflife's involvement, and Odd immediately understands that the submission point is not where they initially expected. Thanks to his own reconnaissance, Odd explains the strange anomaly. Although the horizon seems endless, an invisible, impenetrable wall blocks any attempt to move straight ahead. This leads him to a stunning conclusion. They are now trapped in a giant artificial underground space, completely enclosed by these hidden boundaries. Hearing this, Nina suddenly remembers how earlier Professor Grant flew up to the ceiling. She beams at the thought, if they are really underground, then the real goal is somewhere far above them, high in the sky. Following her example, the students unleash their lethal magic and tear upwards, rushing toward the artificial heavens. He watches as Marcus stretches out his hand, his fingers press against a flickering, invisible barrier that ripples like water. Marcus grimaces and shakes his head after the clumsy collision with that wall, confirming the way up is indeed blocked by a magical seal. He steps forward, presses his own palm to the cold, transparent surface, and feels a familiar hum of energy. He notices the spell is remarkably similar to charms from the magic shop, so it has a complex but recognizable structure. Behind him, the group freezes in anticipation, their gazes fixed on the ceiling of the huge chamber. Next to him, Heathcliff takes the initiative, stretches out his hands, and bright light bursts from his palms. With a focused shout of release, he unleashes a wave of destructive magic that shatters the invisible ceiling. The barrier dissolves into a radiant shower of sparkling fragments. As his magic fades, enormous exquisite doors open above them, a real exit. The group erupts in applause, faces glowing with relief and triumph. Heathcliff acknowledges that Odd and Louise's guesses were correct, and having regained strength, they fly toward the portal finally to submit their results. Crossing to the other side, they are met by an academy official. She carefully notes their arrival. She confirms the names of 6 successful candidates, Leon, Louise, Marcus, Odd, Nina, and Darren, and notes that the trial was completed exactly in 14 hours, so they earned a passing score. They step over the last threshold and find themselves in a spacious, tiered amphitheater where several other students have already gathered. The atmosphere is tense, fatigue mixed with quiet anticipation as those who survived the trial take their seats among their peers. He leans toward Heathcliff, a hint of disappointment barely audible in his voice as he remarks on her late arrival, unlike the others. But Heathcliff responds with a reassuring smile. Considering those unexpected difficulties, making the top 10 out of 60 students is already a great achievement. In front of him, Grant stands behind the podium. His presence commands the entire hall to listen. He thanks the students for their diligence and for successfully completing the first practical exercise before announcing the final exam results. He announces the results of the first practical exam and names Ulnard Schween of Class ZVI the best student. The achievement is incredible. Although the task was designed for cooperation and trade, Ulnard managed it entirely on his own and won victory in just 6 hours. This sensation raises a wave of shock throughout the room. Lodi and others freeze in complete disbelief. She cannot comprehend how someone managed to pass such a trial alone, and her thoughts involuntarily turn to the other girls in the group. If only they could pass it too. Next to Victor sits in stone silence together with Odd and Nina. Despite his stunning success, there is not a trace of camaraderie or celebration between them. Only a heavy, awkward tension hangs over their table. The scene shifts to the sterile walls of the conference room, hands clenched in powerless irritation, and the teachers are heatedly discussing the disciplinary case. Someone suggests expulsion is too harsh, so the minimum punishment for the recent incident should be a 1-week suspension. However, Quentin Wall immediately loudly expresses sharp disapproval, insisting that 1 week for a student who has already caused trouble twice since the beginning of the semester is too lenient. He emphasizes that the students' actions had a clear, aggressive intent, so a much longer time for reflection is needed. The director listens heavily and silently while the council warns him about the stakes. They insist that this issue is critical for the academy itself and that any mistake in how they handle this student will inevitably damage the institution's reputation. Turns to the teacher in the homeroom, asks him to speak up. The council sees. He stands in the classroom with a tense, defiant look. He questions the logic of long-term suspension, not believing that simply sending the boy away for a long time can really change anything in his behavior or character. He continues the heated argument, demanding that his colleagues remember their duty as educators, asking if they even have the right to teach if they cannot properly guide a student who has strayed from the path, and insists that punishment should awaken genuine reflection, not just drive them away. He stands before the assembled teaching staff. He speaks evenly when he states that leading Heathcliff Doan is his responsibility as the class teacher. He asks to be given the opportunity to speak with the boy alone, insisting that guidance is more effective than simple punishments. They nod approvingly. The housekeeping director adjusts his glasses and grants the request, officially entrusting the matter of discipline to Heathcliff, the stern, resilient instructor. Nearby, the dormitory warden remains silent, looking down, unwilling to accept the situation. The old director then returns to the rest of the board and seeks their consent for this decision. One by one, the other teachers express support, confirming there are no more objections to the proposed course of action for the troubled student. When night falls on the territory of the academy, the silence of the quiet corridors of the eastern dormitory is broken only by the soft, even sound of footsteps echoing between the walls. In his dark chambers, Heathcliff sits on the edge of the bed. Thoughts prevent him from sleeping, though it is already late. A sudden sharp rustling near the door makes him startled. He freezes for a moment, wondering who would dare come so late after the mandatory lights out. The door creaks open and Ulnard appears on the threshold, standing with an unexpectedly uncertain expression. Heathcliff, still reeling from the news of his own house arrest, demands to know why his rival has come, and he explains this might be their last chance to talk for a while. The first step into the room, the visitor ignores the cold reserve. His usual arrogance disappears, giving way to a sense of urgency. While Heathcliff presses let him state his business and leave immediately, Ulnard holds his ground, apologizing for the intrusion but insisting he must say what cannot be omitted. For a moment he falters, searching for the right words under the weight of silence. Waiting is unbearable. Heathcliff demands, "Speak quickly, as it is." This forces Ulnard to finally take a breath and answer him directly. His face tenses both from despair and from the order at once as he urges his friend not to give up. He insists, leaving now is not an option. He must complete the training to the very end. The weight of these words momentarily throws the prince off balance. He freezes speechless, his eyes wide open as uncertainty flashes within him when he comprehends the unexpected request. But the silence does not last long. The prince's shock folds into sharp, defensive anger. He dismisses the advice as complete nonsense and demands to know if this was the sole reason for the invasion before ordering an immediate retreat. He warns, their long history does not justify such audacity, especially from someone he now considers a traitor for consorting with commoners. With a sharp refusal still ringing in the air, the heavy door slammed shut and the visitor was left alone in the cold, dimly lit corridor. In the silence of the corridor, memories of another time surfaced when the prince extended his hand with warm, genuine eyes and a smile. Then he insisted on discarding all official titles and forms of address, saying that among true friends there was no place for them. The young companion was overwhelmed, with joy. His face lit up when he was invited to use the nickname. He readily accepted the bond between them, which seemed unbreakable. They were inseparable, laughing to tears, honing their skills in playful duels, and sitting for hours bent over their studies in a quiet, close-knit company. And the warmth is now a distant phantom memory. He presses against the closed door and clenches his fist so tightly that his fingers turn white. A single quiet tear slides down his cheek, falls onto his hand, and splashes. He covers his face with a trembling hand, and an empty, dry laugh escapes from his lips as the feeling of rejection settles in his chest. He does not hold back tears. They stream down his cheeks, and his face contorts in agony as he thinks aloud, is there really no way back to the connection they once had? He sinks against the cold door in the empty corridor, curling into himself like a last quietly whispered prayer to his old friend echoes in silence. He sat alone in the silence of his room while the first light of dawn crawled across the floor. In his head, a storm of thoughts. He kept replaying over and over what was happening to those among whom he had recently found himself. He was unsettled by what Leon was feeling right now. He was shut out by his own secrets and the contempt of those who considered him a traitor just because he communicated with commoners. Looking out the window, he noticed a familiar figure making his way through the morning fog. It was already Marcus. He had gone out and was running, breaking the silence with feverish energy, even though it was a day off. The way the younger boy held himself devotedly both surprised and commanded respect, a sharp contrast to the impassiveness in the dormitory. He pressed his palm to his face, and a wave of inner turmoil overwhelmed him as he watched the boy desperately quicken his steps. From the outside, he was soaked with sweat, his gaze bare, reckless determination bordering on obsession. Seeing this display of spirit, he suddenly felt an unknown, unfounded urge to act. He stood up and crossed the room to the rack with training weapons, and his fingers gripped the hilt of a wooden sword. If fate had truly brought them together, he decided to see it through and give as much advice as he could. Meanwhile, the young runner was already reaching his limit. His breathing broke into ragged, painful gasps. Every step felt like a fight with his own sense of inadequacy, and the memory of helplessness in recent attempts fueled his anger. It flared hotter than the tension in his chest. He pushed himself even further, his fangs grinding in a fierce growl, rebelling against his own limits. Bitter clarity struck. He had neither boundless knowledge nor innate magical talent like his peers, and from this realization, a desperate hunger for power ignited within him, a weapon he could call his own, guaranteeing he would never again feel so powerless. In a moment, his lonely silhouette was further consumed by the road winding through the academy grounds. Silence reigned around, but inside raged an icy storm, and he, as if with stone legs, forced himself to move. Finally, his body gave out and he collapsed forward, gasping, the world blurring before his eyes. Just as he felt he could endure no more, a familiar voice cut through the fog and a hand reached out to him, giving the support he so desperately needed. With doomed, exhausting fury, he plunged into the morning routine and did not let go, running until his lungs burned and strength training until his muscles screamed. In his head echoed his father's voice, an unrelenting reminder. Every sword strike and every mile run was a necessary brick in the foundation of future strength. He was told, consistency over time would become his sharpest weapon. Without allowing himself to breathe, he looked down at his roughened hands and realized the incredible abilities of his friends were not easy gifts from above. Now he understood that Louise's vast knowledge and Leon's powerful magic were hard-earned through years of effort, not something obtained in a single day. With new determination, he clenched his practiced blade and vowed to find his own path to finally stand equal with his comrades. But his lonely, stubborn decision was interrupted by a moment. A voice came from the shadows, mocking his loud exercises and calling him boring because he trained so early. The culprit was Darren. He looked disdainfully, immediately attributing it all to rough, everyday swordsmanship, grinding his teeth from harsh offense without any reason. The young apprentice ordered him to get lost if he was only going to be an obstacle, firmly stating that he still had not forgiven the nobleman for his past behavior. Instead of continuing the verbal attack, the dark-haired student suddenly threw a wooden training sword at his opponent. The boy instinctively caught it, and as he shifted his gaze from the blade to the insolent nobleman standing before him, his confusion only grew. The novice explained that there was only one reason why someone would wave a sword at such a heavenly hour. He admitted that his own noble style was often criticized for mere form and no substance. It seemed he was offering a rare moment of sincerity, acknowledging the chasm between their origins, but at the same time hinting that they both had something to prove. He shot into a ready stance, challenged his opponent, and proposed to test their different styles in battle. The air between them shifted from hostility to cautious, competitive respect as they prepared to face off on the empty training ground. Noble tried to pass it off as a minor whimsical impulse, saying he was just passing by chance. The invitation to train together was unequivocal. Yet despite the tension still smoldering and old grievances flaring up again, an unexpected teamwork began to form between them as they prepared to push each other further. He stands ready, a sharp smile on his lips, warning his opponent not to underestimate him just because he is ordinary. Darren, without losing composure, replies, Marcus should not come to him with wide eyes as soon as the difference between the ordinary and the nobleman becomes visible. After the challenge, they lunged at each other, their movements merging into a continuous fiery precision that pierced the wooden floor. Their wooden blades clashed loudly, neither yielding an inch as they pressed against each other. While the two continued the intense exercise, the sun slowly rose over the academy, casting long shadows on the quiet stone buildings. In the dormitory, Leon stirred in his sleep, stretched his arms wide, and called out a morning greeting to his brother. Soon he realized there was no answer, and his gaze fell on the empty bed where Marcus usually rested. It was there that his training reached its highest point. Rising, he sighed heavily, realizing that his brother had gone to train without him, but his thoughts were cut off by a voice calling from the door. The one who politely apologized for the early intrusion and explained he came seeking help after his acquaintance ran away was strange. He explains that he was gathering eyewitness testimonies about the missing acquaintance. Leon, still touching his eyes as if fighting sleep, listens as his friend talks about a black-haired third-grade student, the one often seen with a pure white cat named Alba. The young man offers to help with the search, noticing how worried his friend looks. Odd freezes in surprise, asks if he is really sure he wants to spend his day off like this, but immediately thanks him, admitting that this extra help is extremely needed now. He notes this is the first time the acquaintance has stayed so far away just as they begin to comb through the academy grounds. He is sure the cat is smart and will sooner or later get back, but the uncertainty of where it is now clearly weighs on him. Suddenly, a scuffle distracts them. Two stray cats have engaged in a fierce hissing fight. Leon nods toward the fight, wondering if one of them might be the lost familiar, but his companion quickly dismisses the thought, saying these are just strays. He remarks how strange it is to see stray animals within the academy walls at all. His anxiety grows when he realizes, if they don't find Albus soon, the well-cared-for familiar might get caught in the crossfire of this territorial dispute and eventually get injured. Their search immediately leads them straight to Marcus and Darren, an unexpected pair, causing them to stop dead in their tracks. Marcus is all sweaty and grinning broadly, waving at them, while Darren stands nearby looking unusually exhausted. Both boys are a complete mess. Their clothes are dirty and their skin shines with sweat. Marcus has a fresh scratch on his cheek, and even usually reserved Aaron is already at the edge of his endurance. The sight of their battered state throws the boy off balance. His eyes widen as he understands everything. This was not a simple training session. The two had already endured an exhausting fight with no concessions, so much so that both were completely drained. He watches as Marcus and Darren continue to fuel the quarrel. Marcus loudly boasts about his victory in their recent duel, saying he won by only 1 point. Darren brushes off the result, calling it a mere lucky accident that happened while they were just practicing strikes with their sword fighting. He quietly chuckles at the predictable dynamic between the two rivals, but his playful mood quickly fades. He shifts into serious, focused contemplation about what needs to be done. The exchange abruptly breaks off when Odd steps forward. His voice sharpens, and he asks why they are all wandering the corridor idly instead of performing their duties. Then he adds more details about the lost acquaintance. He talks about a cat with a noticeable ribbon on its neck. He says he hasn't seen it today, but the creature is known for dozing high up in the trees during classes. Realizing this, Marcus and Darren offer to join the search as soon as they can eat. Although Odd notes, bringing familiars to the academy is strictly forbidden for most students, so the cat's appearance could become a problem. The group sets off, boots rhythmically clicking on the polished floor as they delve deeper into the school's corridors. As they pass through the classroom wing corridor, Leon notices the amazing silence in this place, so refreshing, unlike the usual noise and bustle of the students. Reaching a large window, they look outside. Just beyond, sprawling branches of a giant tree stretch out. But Leon barely exhales disappointment when he realizes the cat is nowhere to be seen among the leaves. They stand next to Marcus, and the silence between them presses as they decide the next step. Odd breaks the silence, nodding toward where Sis stays for a moment to check if she has any news. As soon as they arrived, Darren greeted them, standing with hands in pockets and a characteristically sharp gaze. Marcus beams, thanking him for coming, and Darren silently hands them a package. His face shows a sense of duty and slight irritation. The young boy greedily takes the container and lifts the lid. His eyes widen as he sees how neatly the sandwiches are arranged inside. Darren explains that since they never managed to have lunch, he prepared food for two in advance at the cafeteria, though he voices the gesture roughly, almost disdainfully. Flooded with warmth to the point of ecstasy, Marcus sends sincere words of thanks, which only further stirs Darren. He snaps back that he doesn't want their gratitude and vents his anger, saying they are too kind-hearted to skip their own meals and go hunting for a lost pest of some stranger. They stopped on a stone ledge outside. The group finally takes a break to eat. Marcus happily devours his sandwich. While resting, they discuss the latest update. The owner confirmed the cat still hasn't returned despite all the information they have managed to gather so far. Quentin adjusts his glasses and explains the disappearance is not limited to Albert's cat. He says many students are searching for their missing familiars, and the local strays also seem to have vanished from the academy grounds, hinting at a problem much bigger than one lost pet. Hearing this, Marcus brightens up and nods as if to say, after all, they are in a prestigious magical academy. He wonders if there is a spell to track missing animals, but Leon admits such precise and practical magic is beyond his knowledge today. Taking a more scientific view, they find themselves in the quiet shelves of the library together with Louise. She says that Leon is indeed erudite, but there is another freshman with the same deep level of preparation and, with a hint of curiosity, asks why they specifically decided to find her for this task. She does not keep them in suspense for long. She opens the heavy folio to the needed page. She says there is a spell that can find lost things, and since the familiar carries a portion of its master's mana, their unique magical imprint allows tracing the path directly to the missing creatures. Two boys sincerely thank, and their faces light up with new hope from their words thanks to his concrete help and Louise's expertise. They feel confident. The mystery of the missing cats might finally be solved before the end of the day. A faint smile trembles on her lips as she weighs the situation and honestly admits to herself, participating in the search for cats sounds much more interesting than spending the holiday cramming alone. She asks if she can join and hides her genuine interest under the respectable pretext of observing magic in action. They agree without hesitation. More peopling the search will only become more effective as they prepare to set out. They learn that even Darren has been noticed is asking around everywhere. This indicates anxiety over the missing familiars has spread throughout the entire student community. Their plan was cut off mid-sentence. A corridor echoes with an anxious scream. They jump up and turn sharply, stunned. A voice roars in protest, demanding to be told what is being done to them. The group freezes, stunned by the sudden confrontation. He turns to the sudden commotion, and his eyes widen as he sees people clinging to his brother in the middle of the yards. The stranger, a loud young man with a long fringe, clutched Marcus in suffocatingly tight embraces, and the boy loudly suffers from it. While Marcus continues to struggle with unwanted feelings, Louisa steps forward with a troubled apology. She explains, Elnard is a foreign student, and his cultural norms regarding physical contact are much stronger than theirs, so such surges of friendship often become simply overwhelming. Releasing his grip, the novice turns his whole face and directs his radiant attention to Leon, sincerely rejoicing at the meeting with the student who, it is said, secured first place during yesterday's practical exercises. Before the conversation could continue, two young twins, Lena and Marcia, stepped forward and with polite bows expressed sincere gratitude for the help they had received the day before. Elnard is pleasantly surprised to see that a whole crowd has gathered. He explains, he was looking for them specifically to thank Louisa for the help she gave him in the library that day, and says that it is only right to repay her for her support. When their business was completed and thanks expressed, the energetic trio bids farewell to the company on a cheerful note and quickly disappears from the scene. Left in silence after the sudden whirlwind of energy, the remaining students froze in stunned silence. Marcus looks especially exhausted from this unexpected encounter. He and his companions headed to the dormitory. They wanted to visit Sisley and check how she was feeling. They just arrived. She has fallen onto the cobblestones in obvious despair. Odd sharply calls her name and his voice trembles with anxiety. They find her crying uncontrollably. Heartbroken, the cat Alba is missing. Through sobs she explains that this creature is more than just a pet. For her, their bond is as deep as that of sisters, so the sudden disappearance leaves a void in her like a hole in the soul. Seeing her grief, he gives a glimmer of hope, raises the magical text, and explains that he has found a search spell capable of tracking specific magical signatures. He asks her to try it and hints that the mana within her might be the key to finding her lost companion. She immediately puts theory into practice. Her eyes widen and glowing threads of mana begin to stretch through the air, intertwining and trembling in harmony with the residual essence of her lost friend. The magical path leads the squad to a small, unremarkable warehouse on the academy grounds. She finds it strange that Alba is standing so close but does not respond to her calls, yet they still decide to go inside. They hope the cat has just hidden in a corner and is dozing somewhere. When they abruptly push open the heavy door, they are stopped by the sight. A room full of cats of all shapes and sizes, their eyes gleaming with light from the door crack. In the sea of cats, she finally notices the familiar white furry ball of her companion and tightly embraces the cat with relief and tears in her eyes. Her search is finally over, and she whispers her gratitude. She tightly holds her beloved cat to her chest, her face shining with relief as friends congratulate her on the successful search. Next to Darren, usually cold and arrogant, they catch a moment of pure, unspoiled happiness. He hides his face in the cat while Leon stands silently watching, stunned. The team's uncertainty only grows as Nina approaches closer. Her presence distracts their attention from the strange scene. Their opponents are suddenly overwhelmed by a passion for cats. A heavy silence falls when it becomes clear what happened, and this forces an inevitable explanation for all the chaos. Trembling with guilt, she shows a bundle of silver vine, and her voice breaks as she admits her involvement in the strange events of the day. He steps forward to clarify and says that he gave her a prototype of a magical device to amplify the scent of herbs and attract stray cats, not suspecting that it would have such a strong effect on familiars and even other students. Drowning in remorse, she sincerely apologizes to Cicely for the caused distress, but the girl only smiles. Her heart is now full because her companion is nearby again. It turns out the source of the spell is a specialized incense burner. The power of the herbs in it was enhanced to create an irresistible magnet that drew all the nearby cats into that room. She stands with the others as the cat crowd finally thins out. The cat wanders away into the surrounding forests as soon as the incense goes out. A deep pang of conscience. She bows her head and vows to personally apologize to every pet owner affected by this incident. Her friends quickly support her, assuring that they will help her make amends for the chaos caused by the prototype. Noticing a chance to help, he takes the prototype device from her and says he will return it to the senior students on the way to the library. He smiles and winks at her, assuring if there are any complaints upon return, he will handle it. Standing nearby is that former arrogant nobleman. His face burns with both anger and humiliation as he removes cat fur from his uniform. Classmates give him no respite. They mock his secret love for cats and his frequent walks, saying he secretly sneaks away all this time just to really play with them. They continue teasing him, laughing at the happy, smiling expression he had when surrounded by animals, hardly like his usual stern nature. He bursts into a roar of anger, demands they forget everything they saw, and threatens them if they mention it again. Eventually, the company moves on. Their laughter spreads across the yard as they leave the boy who is smoking behind. The tension of the day completely melted in a shared moment of ease, and the group became closer than before. When the sun begins to dip below the horizon and long shadows fall over the academy grounds, the two of them walk side by side to the dormitories. She thanks him for his help throughout the ordeal, noting that it is already so late though it was supposed to be a quiet day of rest. He lifts his gaze to the darkening sky and barely smiles quietly, contentedly. Despite the chaos and unexpected turn, he admits, everything turned out so that the day was truly pleasant, and in the calm evening air he finds peace. While others found solutions throughout the day, the young prince sat in the stuffy silence of his chambers. He was gnawed by a cold truth. Although he was locked in his room, no word of care or any instruction came from the king. With an exhausted sigh, he threw the book down and closed it. The sound echoed dull in the empty space. A dark thought settled heavily within him. He felt completely abandoned, as if the world and even his own father had simply chosen to forget about his existence. His silence shattered the moment the door was kicked off its hinges without warning. A rough voice thundered, announcing an unwelcome guest in his sanctuary. The culprit turned out to be none other than Grant, the stern instructor from Akademievka. He stood in the doorway, framed by the opening, and looked straight and firmly. Known to be at the limit of his strength and completely bewildered, the prince asked what business this teacher could have with him right now. Ignoring the boy's confusion, the instructor barked an order for him to move. With fierce insistence, he declared they must immediately start a special extracurricular lesson without any chance for objection. He rests his head on his palm, and the carriage rhythmically sways, trying to ease even a little the deep boredom that settled on his face as they crossed the rocky mountain pass. Noticing that his passengers were lethargic, the scarred man sitting opposite remarked that this road was probably so exhaustingly boring. The man continues the conversation and admits, although the young man is from noble lineage, he is still a royal person. The prince retorts, crossing the boundaries of the academy is just returning to the stifling hierarchies of the great world. The wheels rattle on the uneven road. He stifles a yawn and asks where they are going, but he is answered. The answer will be revealed very soon. The traveling carriage finally clinked and stopped right in front of the huge fortified gates, and when the instructor ordered him to wait, he suddenly realized how far they had already traveled from the academy. His eyes widen in disbelief when some man casually says that they have royal permission to cross the border, a revelation that leaves the prince stunned. He protests, demanding to know why he was not informed that they were leaving the kingdom completely. But his companion only smiles slyly and admits he kept that detail to himself. The instructor leans forward, looks mockingly, and asks if the prince feels vulnerable without his usual guard, and the young nobleman, stunned by outrage, cannot utter a word. He explodes on the spot in a fit of royal indignation, his face twisted with anger, and he demands to know how some commoner dared to touch him. but the crippled instructor does not budge an inch. His grip is firm and unyielding as he prepares to put an end to the prince's arrogance. With a quick, muffled gesture, the man presses a finger to the prince's lips, and his protest is instantly cut off by a wave of magic. He warns the young nobleman not to confuse his current state. The boy's gaze widens, mixing shock with sudden strength, and he falls silent. The instructor continues the stern lecture, reminding the prince his royalty and duty are to protect people, not harm them. He makes it clear that this journey is not a stroll for recovery, and that the royal title does not wash away the weight of such a sin. As soon as the silent spell is lifted, the prince sharply inhales. His face burns both from physical exhaustion and relentless irritation. He fixes his gaze on his captor, but the resistance in his eyes already dulls the growing sense of hopelessness. As the carriage shakes on the lonely road, he sinks into gloomy silence and replays a life in his mind where neither servants nor sycophants ever dared to contradict his whims. The realization that his position no longer saves him from consequences settles as a heavy burden in the quiet of the cabin. The journey finally ends in a cozy clearing where a modest hut stands by a still, dark pond. Stepping into the unfamiliar wilderness, the prince looks around in complete stupor, and his voice trembles as he asks what kind of place this is where they have been brought. The instructor surprisingly straightforwardly tells him that they will have to live here together for the foreseeable future, and this provokes another fit of complete disbelief in him. The prince spits with contempt. He snorts and shouts that such a neglected place is unfit for human habitation, and certainly not for anyone to stand here. He declares that he intends to return home immediately, even if he has to do it alone. But the instructor responds only with a cold, disdainful, indifferent gesture. The man challenges him to try, fully knowing the boy is already trapped in a world far beyond his understanding and ability to navigate. He looked down at the silver bracelet on his wrist and listened as the instructor insisted that it was a protective talisman worthy of a member of the royal family. The man spoke with feigned concern, saying there would be a disaster if something happened to the prince, and asked to keep the charm on at all times to guarantee his safety in the wild. Trying to summon his strength, he encountered a cold, empty feeling where his mana should have been. The realization hit him physically just as the instructor began to walk away, leaving him alone with a sudden, terrifying emptiness in his soul. The young prince barked in betrayal, finally understanding that the magic was a magical shackle pendant, created to deprive him of his main trump card. The instructor was not the least bit embarrassed. He simply said to do as he wished. And this erupted in the boy an unruly promise would find his way home, even without his spells. He rushed into the dense thicket, running until his lungs burned, but the trees seemed to shift and twist around him. Wherever he turned, the path still led back to the same clearing as if the forest itself was a living, breathing cage. Deciding to outsmart the forest, he drew his blade and carved a deep notch into a tree trunk to mark his path. But even when the marks were there, the fog that confused him still led him in circles, mocking every attempt to find next. Gasping for air and choking on sweat, he fell near the water. Itzulfan saw the instructor sitting calmly, fishing rod in hand. His composed face became a bitter verdict, his own helplessness and the futility of all attempts to break free. His stomach growled with sharp, persistent pain, adding physical torment to the exhausting fatigue in his head. It was then that the truth finally dawned on him. The entire region was held by a powerful lost spell, a labyrinthine curse that made escape impossible for the uninitiated. The instructor tore his gaze from the catch, asking if the prince had finally exhausted his stubbornness and was ready to accept his new reality. He gestured to the fish frying over a small fire and said, "Since no other food can be found, it's time to stop fighting the inevitable and eat." He stands before the young prince and challenges him to test the limits of the boy's abilities. Since the boy's only tool is magic, the mentor offers a simple wager. Victory in the duel will bring a reward of fresh fish for lunch. With a sharp click, the man removes the seal from the boy's wristband. He reconnects with his mana. Even when the prince warns that he will not hold back and will not be responsible for any injuries, the instructor does not flinch. He only snorts disdainfully at the warning, declaring that years of training have made him too resilient to be defeated by some 15-year-old novice. He demands that the boys stop hesitating and strike with full force from the very beginning. They meet in the center of the clearing, and the air thickens with tension as the duel begins. While the instructor maintains a calm, almost mocking restraint, the prince's face hardens. A cold, focused aggression remains in it. Releasing restored mana, the young man launches a devastating spell, and on the battlefield emerges a roaring tiger of pure flame, rushing forward. Despite the furious rage of the fire, the instructor does not flinch, meets the magical creature head-on, and extinguishes the hot assault with a single precise attack. Stunned by how easily his latest attack was stopped, the boy can only stare dumbfounded, not believing his own eyes. Sweat runs down his forehead as he realizes the true chasm between their powers. He felt the weight of the instructor's gaze, an even, unshakable pressure, as if he saw through every one of his movements. Frustrated that one strike failed, the prince unleashed a hail of fire, hoping that sheer quantity alone could overcome the man's defense. But the instructor did not move, standing behind a shimmering six-dimensional barrier veil, and the flames, washing over it, caused no damage to the shield. Seeing that not a single scratch remained, he pushed himself further, forcing the magic to speed up and become more precise, and unleashed a whole barrage of crystalline shards. The instructor only calmly observed, almost mockingly smiling, while the defense remained impenetrable. Changing tactics, the young noble summoned chains of pure fire and whipped them through the air with desperate fury. He threw them aside, and the heated links whistled as if sawing at a weak spot in the instructor's stance. One of the chains finally caught a barely noticeable crack remained in the shimmering barrier wall, a small victory which the instructor acknowledged with a sharp gleam in his eyes. He noted the boy's effort, but immediately waved it off as if saying it was naive, even as the prince gritted his teeth, choking on increasing exhaustion. The instructor pronounced his full name, Heathcliff Dune, officially recognizing the undeniable magical talent the boy possessed. It was a rare moment of affirmation, but with a heavy caveat. Pressing one finger, the man began to gather a concentrated ball of energy in his palm, his voice cold, commanding. He explained, "The power exists, but its application is generally wrong, and as a teacher he is obliged to show him the true path." A sudden blinding flash, and the instructor released a precise beam of energy that cut through the air. The prince could only freeze in stunned silence, eyes wide open with the realization of how far he still had to grow. He froze in disbelief, his breath faltering, until the scale of the abyss in power became undeniable. Nearby, Leon could only watch and freeze in silence, trying to understand what had happened for the proud nobleman to fall so despondently. Standing over the fallen student, the instructor loomed like an immovable mountain. Heathcliff felt his heart drop to his heels. He had terribly underestimated the strength of the academy's teaching staff. Even in his best form, he could not compare to this all-conquering presence. When the silence between them stretched, the instructor leaned forward, speaking quietly and with a question. He asked if the fight was already over and reminded the boy they were alone and there would be no witnesses to anything that happened next. Suddenly, a giant hand stretched out toward him. Its shadow fell on his trembling face. The instructor spoke of death. Even if he were to take and end the boy's life right now, it would be the consequence of the path this wild Heathcliff had chosen to walk. He continued his grim lesson and explained. The fear now gripping Heathcliff's heart was exactly the same as what other students felt when he directed his power against them. The realization struck the young nobleman like a physical blow. He froze, unable to utter a word, for his own cruelty had reflected back. Slightly softening his tone but not losing tension, the man explained, "True power is meant for protection, not for petty, showy displays of dominance," which Heathcliff sought. Finally, he decided that the boy simply lacked the wisdom to properly use his gifts and treated him as if he were a child who had stumbled upon a dangerous toy. Driven to the edge by the lecture, the boy growled at the man, "Enough," and burst into a panicked, clumsy outburst. He no longer had the strength to endure being burdened with his own incapacity, exposed for all to see. This last flare was met with icy ease. The instructor caught the fierce flailing side, and a stern disappointment froze on his face. Heathcliff's resistance cracked, his pride crumbled under the weight of obvious truth, was powerless before true mastery. He holds his ground until the stubborn self-control of the young prince finally shatters completely. Heathcliff screamed, his voice breaking with despair, demanding to know what some simple instructor could understand about the weight of his life. Behind this outburst lies a whole life of unnoticed efforts. The boy recalls his childhood spent in a continuous chase for perfection. He pursued victories in studies, fencing, and etiquette, yet the praise he so craved always went only to his older brothers. Then neglect cut deeper than any blade, leaving him with memories of a cold home where neither father nor mother ever once gave even a simple gesture of affection. He never felt the warmth of a hand on his head as a sign of approval. Tears run down his face as he admits magic was his only salvation, the only reason his father finally acknowledged his existence. For him, not becoming king means losing his own humanity, that fate he cannot accept after defeat by those he considers commoners. Burned out in anger, the broken young man falls to his knees and his voice turns into an empty whisper. He looks up at the man before him and asks sincerely, to tears, how someone as worthless as him can even continue living. In response, the veteran warrior pulls the boy into a strong fatherly embrace. He thanks him for finally opening up and gently explains, the crown is not the only measure of a man's worth. He also promises to show him another path starting tomorrow. Later that same evening, the fire in the boy's eyes went out, replaced by a heavy, deep fatigue. The instructor orders him to rest and eat, and for the first time the prince does not resist, he only quietly, submissively acknowledges the command. When he finally sinks into sleep on a bed far poorer than any he has ever known, a strange, unspeakable silence washes over him. Although the room is simple, he finds here what the stone pits of the palace could never give him. He is haunted by a cold, inner voice that pierces his thoughts and questions. Is he truly certain about the path he has chosen? In the darkness above him looms a twisted and malicious reflection of his friend, whispering poisonous doubts into his ear. It mocks his sudden trust in an ordinary instructor and asks how he can possibly value the words of a stranger over the 15 years of suffering and toil he has already endured. The mental attack bursts in with sharp, physical pain, forcing him to clutch his head as the phantom's grip seems to tighten. Nearby, the real Leon stands frozen with a look full of deep concern. He cannot see the demonic struggle raging inside his friend. Voices multiply into a furious cacophony of his own failures and the unbearable burden of his royal lineage. They remind him of the brother he is expected to surpass and the countless sacrifices he has already made, cruelly interrogating how his past self would react if he were to give up everything right now. In the whirlpool of darkness and despair, one sharp command cuts through the chaos and demands that he regain self-control. It is Leon's voice. He holds him firmly, and in his eyes burns a desperate sincerity. He will beg not to give up. He insists that he simply must complete the training and properly finish the academy. Looking into those eyes, he feels a memory begin to surface through the haze of tears, a vow he long forgot, and he remembers again why he took this path. He finally finds his voice, rejecting the darkness and affirming his dedication. He says he cannot fail because of the promise he made. He swears to finish the Magic Academy and finally walk the path he chose with his own hands. He lay motionless, stunned, while Darren Lowe's shadow whispered softly in his ear. The apparition mocked him. It pulled out the name of the man he once knew and accused him of abandoning his past, and Leon watched, unaware of the inner struggle. He flinched as the shadowy figure spoke increasingly venomously, warning, "Choose your words carefully," for the influence of his family was nothing compared to the power that lived within it. She spat out the word traitor, condemning him for consorting with commoners and breaking the unwritten bonds of their social standards. Memories flashed before his eyes, Darren's face twisted with anguish and resentment. He only gasped for air. The weight of his past mistakes suffocated him, while the image of the man he lost to grew larger in his mind. Bending in bed, he convulsively clutched his head, trying to stifle the mocking laughter. The shadow did not cease its attack, calling him a pathetic, miserable creature and savoring the guilt that threatened to devour his being to the core. He felt the dark entity pressing its hands to his templous gold, intrusive. It whispered that the path he had chosen could not be changed and commanded him to stop resisting, urging him to embrace the darkness and the negative emotions raging in his heart. With the last dreadful wish for his dreams to come true, the shadow dissolved into the night. Outside the quiet hut, the crackle of the campfire pierced the silence. The maimed instructor sat alone, his gaze fixed on the flickering flame. He heard footsteps and turned around. A young prince was approaching him in the darkness. He asked in a calm, rough voice whether insomnia prevented him from sleeping, and with a sharp gaze searched the boy's tired face, looking for signs of the ordeal he had just endured. He watched as a young man stood before him. The heavy burden of inner struggle finally began to lift. Entangled with the ghosts of his past, the student took a steady breath, ready to move forward and find the peace he had long been denied. Under the cover of night, Heathcliff stood motionless in the forest, staring at something invisible. Nearby, the scarred instructor sat by the crackling campfire and broke the silence, asking if the young man found it hard to fall asleep. He did not answer. Instead, he suddenly lunged forward abruptly, fiercely, and gracefully, in a way that contradicted his usual pensiveness. The blow of his fist struck the flickering barrier. The collision tore the clearing with a shockwave, and the mentor froze with wide-open eyes and complete disbelief. The hexagonal shield shattered like glass under pressure. The experienced warrior felt a pure, primal force pressed on him from the boy's side. Struggling with the colossal pace, the instructor tried to stay on his feet while his student stood at a distance, enveloped in an aura of unconditional power. He froze, looking at the remnants of his own defense, the cold in his chest from realizing that one strike had bypassed his armor, and noticed the eerie, empty expression on the young prince's face. The boy's hand flashed once more abruptly and blurred, and the movements were driven by an instinct that seemed completely disconnected from his consciousness. He was desperate to reach him. The instructor growled a question, but his voice could not break through the storm of wild magic now raging from the boy on a frightening, unprecedented scale. He stood stunned in shock, looking at the figure before him. Could this mighty, unrecognizable being really be the young prince he knew? Realizing action was necessary, the veteran warrior lunged forward. His hands wove a complex spell and heavy iron shackles appeared. He gritted his teeth and decided to stop the boy before his frenzied movements escalated further and broke free of control. He watched as the created shackles tightened firmly around the prince and pressed his hands to his sides, while the boy, stunned, looked down. For a moment it seemed as if the physical binding could restrain the wave of magic surging forward. But the silence did not last long. Dark energy vomited a flash. An explosion shattered the chains like glass. The force of the blast spread outward in a terrifying display of raw, wild power. Stunned by the shockwave, the instructor watched as the boy stood in the skate at the very heart of the dark vortex. His face was eerily calm as he began to unravel the very fabric of the binding spell used against him. He instantly changed tactics. The threat had to be stopped, but the boy could not be harmed. He raised a flickering protective barrier and firmly took a stance as the prince's hand began to glow, focused and eerie. In the midst of the magical storm, the prince's gaze remained motionless, distant, as if his mind was dissolving into that colossal power that surged through his veins in waves. Just as the tension was about to snap, a steady hand reached through the chaos, grabbing his wrist, trying to pull him from madness and stop the strike that was about to fall. He smashes the prince into the mud. The blow finally stops the chaotic surge of energy. Heathcliff flies helplessly, his bloody aura fading as quickly as it burst forth. Checks the pulse. The instructor finds that the boy's heart beats evenly but weakly, and it becomes clear the sharp breakdown occurred not due to a physical blow, but due to the complete exhaustion of his magical reserves. Sweat ran down the veteran's temple in a cold stream as he realized how close they were to disaster. If the boy hadn't already spent a significant portion of his mana today, the instructor might not have been able to contain the explosion. After he carried the unconscious prince into the safe room of the dormitory, he lays the boy in bed. Now the room is silent, a sharp contrast to the destructive scene in the forest. He froze for a moment by the headboard, watching how evenly the prince's chest rose and fell. For now, at least, the immediate threat had passed, and the boy's spirit seemed to cling to a fragile scrap of support. He decides that this anomaly cannot be ignored. He steps into the corridor, intending to give a full report to the director. But as soon as he moves, something sinister begins to stir in the shadows of the room. A figure with sharp ears and a predatory smile loomed over the sleeping Heathcliff. The uninvited guest mocked the prince's weakness, which seemed visible, but admitted the spectacle he had just witnessed was much more interesting than he had expected. With a sharp-clawed hand, the creature touches the boy's face before tasting what still clings to his fingers, declaring its intent to gather the prince's true emotions, delighted by the rare prey it has just found. He snarls fiercely, his sharp fangs gleaming as the evil idea takes root in his mind. Ahead lies what must happen, filling him with a grim, twisted premonition. Below, in the silence of the night, the instructor stands with the owl messenger, unaware of the shadow looming over his ward. By morning, the nighttime tension had subsided, leaving behind a heavy, oppressive silence. Grant sits alone on the dusty ground near the infirmary, staring into the void and replaying the weight of what he just experienced in his mind. His loneliness is cut by the sound of approaching footsteps. Raising his gaze, he shudders. Before him stands a young prince, exhausted but unyielding. Without a word, the boy sharply falls into a deep, solemn bohai's forehead almost touching the ground. By this, he demonstratively humiliates himself so much that the instructor is bewildered. He will beg that man to teach him how to live. His voice trembles from raw, newly born despair. He asks for guidance on how to exist, even if he loses all his magic, searching for a way forward that does not rely on his natural power. The instructor stares at him motionlessly, stunned into silence, as if checking, could the prince really not remember that chaotic surge of magic that erupted that night? The boy does not stop, admits that now he himself understands. His magic is still immature and he was too arrogant. A soft, friendly smile finally touches Grant's face as he reaches out his hand. He promises to do everything in his power so that the boy sees his worth, not only the one in his veins along with mana. They sealed the pact with a firm handshake, a new bond of mentorship forged in the aftermath of the crisis. Heathcliff lifts his gaze, a spark of hope in his eyes. He is ready to begin training under the guidance of the one he once feared. He feels completely out of his element as soon as he starts everyday tasks. A culinary attempt turns into a failure, food burns black, then a chaotic struggle with flattering fish slime begins, and finally the laundry stubbornly remains stained. The young prince cannot endure it, overwhelms him with the unbearable heaviness of manual labor. He looks intently down at the bowl with blackened, unrecognizable porridge and sinks into deep despair, blaming himself for what he thinks is his own worthlessness. He decides that calling it a failure is shameful and is about to throw it away, but a stern voice sharply cuts through his pitiful thoughts and commands, "Wait." Instructor Grant had already taken his place at the simple wooden table and, delivering an unequivocal final word, announced they would eat this dish. The young man could only freeze, staring in despair, his mouth agape at the very thought of swallowing the burnt-offered dish. He tries to protest, insists that this mess is inedible, but Grant does not move. He orders him to sit down. The scarred man explains, what the prince calls a failure is everyday reality for ordinary people. The weight of this revelation stuns the boy. He is forced to face for the first time the huge chasm between his protected life and the world he is only now trying to understand. While they sit, Grant's voice becomes calm, instructive. Reminds, today is the day of first attempts. The first cleaning, the first fishing, the first cooking. He explains, no one masters these skills immediately, but the essence of life is not to give up and to repeat these small actions again until over time they become a habit. Across the table, Mentor continues the lesson, emphasizing, growth is a process of accumulation, gathered day by day through the repetition of these modest efforts. Despite the encouragement, he feels his hands trembling and his head spinning at the very thought that he was allowed to experience failure. When Grant gently repeats again that failure is acceptable, it strikes right at the young man's deeply rooted anxiety, shaking everything he was taught about value and outcome. He suddenly bursts into a desperate scream, eyes wide open. There is a whole life of suppressed pressure there. He insists that failure was never an option in his world, recalls how his brother never hesitated, and because of this, he feels that anything less than perfection is an unforgivable weakness. He breaks out with a scream of pain. The feeling of royal blood constricts him like a cage. He cries out that as a representative of royal blood, such weakness and indulgence must never be allowed, but his voice breaks under the weight of his own expectations. To this outburst, Grant responds firmly. He reminds the boy that before being a member of the royal family, he is simply a person. He emphasizes, Heathcliff is himself first and foremost, and his personality is not limited only to his origin. Reality hits him in the very heart, and tears endlessly roll down his face as the instructor's words sink into him. He finally understands, his struggle was not about defeating others but about finding his own worth. He sobs without stopping. He pours out his soul and confesses, all he wanted was for someone to look at him, only at him, Heathcliff Dewin, and to acknowledge his existence beyond his title. The raw, defenseless honesty of his plea hangs in the air. 2 weeks pass and the atmosphere changes completely. A meticulously planned lunch is laid out on the table. He calls his instructor with a new purpose, announces that the dish is ready, and invites him to join. When the teacher takes a sip, the young man freezes and watches, holding his breath. The tension eases as soon as he asks how the dish tastes. He awaits the verdict, the results of his hard work in the kitchen. Only a barely noticeable, rare smile touches the instructor's face as he confirms that the dish is tasty. The boy's face lights up with genuine joy and relief, a bright contrast to the despair he felt just a few weeks ago. Later, when they sit together, he reflects on the time spent with the mentor and admits to his former arrogance. He says he sincerely regrets his actions against Leon Hartfilia and other apprentice craftsmen and vows to atone for the mistakes he made when blinded by his own status. He openly sobbed. The burden of his past sins finally broke through his royal mask. Through tears, he asked himself whether he even had the right to exist in this place and whether his life had any value after all he had done. In response to this vulnerability, the maimed instructor cut a harsh but necessary path forward. He said he must relearn everything from the very ground up and emphasized that as long as he remains true to himself, he has the natural right to learn and live. He took those words to heart, looked up at the bright sky, and felt peace, deciding no longer to live as a prince defined only by status, but simply as a person. Elsewhere, while the morning sun rose higher, Leon reached out and shook his muscles, shaking off the last crumbs of sleep, and outside the window birds were chirping. He descended the stairs, listening to the strange silence from the training area, and realized that Marcus had not appeared for their usual morning practice. Approaching the common room, he was surprised to hear a sudden burst of activity from inside. It seemed that his friend had simply decided to gather here instead of everything else. The door burst open and revealed chaos. Marcus was sitting, tightly bound with thick ropes to a chair, his mouth gagged with a cloth that muffled his protests. Leon rushed forward in panic, frantically demanding why he was tied up, and pulling at his hands tried to untangle the restraints. As soon as he reached for the ropes, a sharp glare from above caught his eye, and he looked up anxiously. A new, unexpected presence loomed over them. Suddenly, he is knocked off his feet. A sharp scream bursts from his mouth, and he falls backward. The sudden force of the ambush knocks him down. He staggers in this mess and cannot stand up again. The source of the mysterious glare turns out to be the dormitory warden, Quentin Walls. He stands with a predatory smile. Behind him unfolds a grim scene. A dozen students, including Marcus and Hitchcliff, sit tied up and gagged in neat rows. Quentin adjusts his glasses, his mocking smile and the sparkle of dust flicker as he chuckles about how they have all gathered again this year. His face is pure, calculated malice. Quentin Walls stands before a bunch of tied-up freshmen, and his expression mixes theatricality and mischief. He greets the newcomers, thanking them for gathering under such strange and harsh circumstances. He pointed his finger directly at Leon, who was struggling against his shackles and demanding explanations for such strange treatment. The senior laughed heartily, praising the guy's initiative, and admitted that perhaps these antics were a bit too harsh for a usual welcome. He suddenly strikes a dramatic pose. His voice lowers as he declares that their dormitory is currently experiencing a severe crisis. Leon and the others froze in shocked silence while the senior raised a swirling vortex of magical energy, emphasizing how serious his words were. With a solemn gesture and a flurry of magical sparks around him, he joyfully announces that the magical festival is about to begin. He snaps his fingers and the ropes binding the students instantly vanish, so they can finally move again. He looks back at the confused freshmen and a confident spark flashes in his gaze. When Leon questions his true intentions, the senior dryly notes, the leadership already understands the weight of what lies ahead. Then he returns to the larger group of students, his voice thunders as he rallies them to fight. He calls on everyone in South Dorm to prove their superiority and show the rest of the academy their true strength. Leon remains only to watch as the crowd erupts with shouts and applause. Anticipation and excitement overwhelm him as he realizes he has been drawn into another chaotic event once again. He and his classmates gathered on the grass when Louise approaches them and notices they too have been caught up in the whirlpool of the upcoming magical festival. While the group settles into their places, she explains, the upperclassmen are surprisingly serious about the event, a prestigious tradition where different dormitories compete against each other. The conversation continues until it becomes clear. The festival has a deeper purpose to unite people and dissolve the social barriers that still remain between noble-born students and commoners, even in their first year of study. She also warns them about the consequences of failure. The lowest-ranked dormitory is assigned a week of exhausting extra classes during the summer holidays, forcing everyone to balance regular studies with preparation for the festival. Hearing this, the students from the East Dorm express their own anxieties, and some are willing to do anything to avoid extra classes. Others feel a faint sense of guilt for having to compete openly against friends. Breaking the oppressive silence, the energetic Lodi raises a ruckus and issues a challenge. An honest fight without insults after which no grudges will be held, and he especially singles out the stoic Deer. Nearby, the air thickens with rivalry. Ulnard confronts Leon and, twisting a smug smile, declares that he has no intention of losing, especially since spectators are expected to come for the festivities. Later, as he walked through the quiet forest, the young mage thought about the weight of the upcoming event. He knew he was chosen to represent the South Dorm in the high-stakes magic competition. Now he must face the harsh reality of magical combat, a fight to the death between the most talented mages from each dormitory. The rules seem too simple. Victory is achieved by landing 3 hits on the opponent's body or breaking the magical crest the position on the back. To protect participants, powerful protective spells are woven into the arena itself, preventing any real physical harm during the fierce magical clashes. While discussing the selection for other dormitories, it becomes clear representatives for the North and West have already been chosen. Luisa Nemistria will lead the North, and Leonard Schwain will take the role for the West. At the same time, for the South, where the dormitory's village is the second-year representative, seems to have been a unilateral decision by Quentin, without the usual consultations. This news throws Lodi Haler into shock. Her thoughts race as she imagines the formidable opponents Leon will have to face. She wonders if anyone can withstand such master mages from rival dormitories. Despite her anxiety, the announcement is official. Leona has been chosen to represent the South in the upcoming magical duel competition among second-year students. She admits that Leon is undoubtedly the strongest student in South Dormitory, but her competitive spirit does not fade. As a representative of North, she declares her categorical no to defeat this, opening the way to a fierce rivalry. Leon meets her gaze with calm determination, takes on the burden of a new role, and vows to give his all, for the choice has already been made. Their tense confrontation is suddenly broken by the loud, measured ringing of the school bell. The realization that the afternoon classes are about to start sends a wave of urgency through the group. They quickly hustle to make it to the next lecture. In class, the focus shifts to learning. Professor Grant throws a difficult question at the students. Marcus suddenly finds himself in the spotlight, sweating noticeably as he tries to extract the answer from his notes. Seeing his friends worry, Leon leans closer and quietly whispers a hint to help him get out of trouble. He manages to give the correct answer about the sleeping dragons of the swamps, to the professor's full satisfaction. When the lesson is directed, Marcus breathes a sigh of relief and thanks Leon for his timely help. Grant concludes the class with a reminder: the Magic Festival is a priority, but homework and regular classes must not be neglected. When the school day was over, the students set off and their mood improved as they discussed the upcoming festival. Marcus was himself chatting loudly, walking ahead with a broad smile, and all his morning anxiety in class dissolved into anticipation of what lay ahead. He and his classmates are met by the wild energy of Quentin Walls. He lifts the South Dormitory for training in after-school magical combat. Despite the fatigue after a long day of classes, the mentor's enthusiasm is contagious. He calls everyone to prepare for the upcoming festival. While Quentin recharges his team, other dorm supervisors pick up. Reed heads to the East Dormitory, Julia to the North, and Thomas Liu to the West, and all gather their students, so every corner of the academy buzzes with the spirit of competition. Soon they move to the spacious training grounds. Leon stands alone in the very center of the large dueling circle. He takes a deep breath, focuses his thoughts, and prepares for the practical combat exercise that is about to begin. His classmates stand against him, among them Louise and Ulnard, and all hold sticks at the ready. The air is thick with tension. They stare each other down, each student waiting for the signal to unleash their magic. A sharp exclamation and the training sparring erupts into a flurry of movement. Several students cast their spells simultaneously, and the arena is flooded with flashes of energy and the murmur of magical incantations. The young mage immediately goes on the defensive, barely managing to dodge the barrage of spells. Luisa seizes the moment and launches a direct attack, forcing him to react with split-second precision. He slides across the stone floor and his thoughts race as he recalls the rule: 3 hits defeat, and he realizes defense alone will not save him from this onslaught. He searches for a way to turn the tide of the battle. This realization strikes him while he is still retreating, trying to find a gap in the opponent's coordination. The thought overwhelms him again: victory cannot be won by dodging alone. He must find the courage to strike back. He is surrounded on all sides by a siege, while Luisa mocks his defense sharply and disdainfully. She shows that such simple, predictable attacks will never hit, and meanwhile Ulnard seizes the moment and launches a follow-up strike. His eyes gleam with the predatory thrill of rivalry. He is pierced by a panic shock. He is cornered. Options are melting away as the magical pressure intensifies. He does not manage to move suddenly. A blow comes that knocks him off balance, and the very force tears through him as if thunder rumbles in his bones. He is thrown to the ground. Through the chaos, a voice rings out, informing him that his back was completely exposed. Despite the painful defeat and the dust settling around, he forces himself up. His voice is strained but resolute, demanding another round. He gasps for air, his lungs burn, his body aches from the relentless barrage. Such brutal training intensity is already taking its toll, yet the fire in his eyes does not fade as he prepares once again to face his peers. He sinks to the floor, his magical barrier crumbles into shimmering fragments and vanishes into the air. He looks up at his mentor, and in his eyes are disappointment and despair, pleading for one more chance to prove himself, not allowing the session to end on such a low note. Supervisor Quentin watches with a condescending smile, adjusts his glasses, and voices the harsh truth about the upcoming festival. He warns, in a real duel, opponents will undoubtedly target the weakest link, and if the coordinated attack is not withstood, defeat is inevitable. Nearby, a group of students gathers, their faces showing either a humorous mood or casual observation. Louisa notes that they haven't even started fighting seriously yet, and Elnard adds, Leon is still by no means a match for them in this state. He remains silent, and the words spoken by them settle in the silence as he looks at his open palm. Reviewing lessons from the past, he feels for a tiny hint or forgotten technique, one that can bridge the gap between his current limits and the strength needed to survive. Lodi Haler suddenly appears and greets Leon with a cheerful hello. She says she brought healing medicine for her younger one, and he is thrown off by her unexpected arrival. As the group gathers around, she explains, this year she is not conducting practical training, so she has no reason to leave her classes. Others thank her for the delivery. She shifts her attention to Leon and notices how exhausted he looks. With a smile playful but caring, she decides to give him not one but 2 bottles, hoping they will help him recover after the exhausting schedule. She swings her wrist and throws glass bottles at him as if casually. He flails frantically, his hands jerking out to snatch the precious medicine from the air before they shatter on the ground. He stares frozen at the bottles in his hand. Suddenly, it dawns on him. He exclaims that he can control his right and left hands independently of each other, and this ability seems to be of great importance for his training. Meanwhile, Lodi apologizes for the clumsy throw, not knowing what breakthrough she has just triggered. He is glowing from this enlightenment and sincerely thanks her, declaring that he finally has a lead. Without wasting a second, he announces that he is heading straight to the library to learn more, so she remains a bit embarrassed but is glad she was helpful. When he rushed away, Elnar similarly nods to how unpredictable Lodi can be, comparing her actions to supporting the opponent, but just tilts his head slightly with a sly gleam and brushes it off, as if to say she simply took the medicine to some younger person who needed it. From the library shelves comes an irritating cry. Lunyon echoes like an echo. Leon sighs, the work is still far from finished. His voice, tired and yet full of new zeal, dives back into the research. In the silence of the library, where the air is thick with the scent of old parchment, she is surrounded by his peers. Louisa calls Mark. Her voice sharply cuts through the refined academic atmosphere as she gathers the groups. Hunched over the table, a groan bursts out. He is overwhelmed by the impossible task for the upcoming magic festival, his energy completely gone. Lodi stands nearby. Patience is wearing thin. She urges him to finish the work so they can both finally rest, emphasizing that she is just as exhausted. The conversation abruptly changes direction when Louisa turns to Lodi with wide-open eyes and asks if she secretly trained with him. Lodi immediately brushes it off and rejects the idea, explaining that her focus was only on helping Louisa with her own lessons. Watching 2 girls talk, he feels a sharp pang of envy. Louis is lucky to have such dedicated personal lessons, while he has to drag his work alone and wade through research. Breaking free from his thought, Lodi leans forward and asks if he managed to find any useful clues in the thicket of books before him. He raises his gaze, a spark of new concentration flashes in his eyes as he confirms that his efforts have finally paid off. With a sudden burst of excitement, he explains his breakthrough. He finally understood how to simultaneously embody defensive and offensive magic. Lodi, impressed by his success, offers to give some specialized advice so that he masters the delicate balance necessary for such a trick. She explains the theory of magical distribution, how to go beyond simple equal division of power and consciously adjust the ratio, for example, 80 defense and 20 offense or vice versa. A mage is capable of truly smooth spell control, adapting to any situation on the fly. To demonstrate this, she extends her hand and takes his palms in hers. Her closeness causes his face to flush a deep crimson. She apologizes for the coldness of her touch, completely unaware of how wildly his heart is pounding or the confused state her sudden closeness causes. After their session, he returned back together with Lodi and Reed, thanking her for the guidance. As soon as they approached the dormitories, Supervisor Quentin called out to them from afar. Dinner is already starting and the doors will soon be locked for the night. Later that same evening, his friend Reed sat on the bed, his face twisted with tension how he endures their goal. He insisted that using 2 spells simultaneously is fundamentally different from passive draining of flight magic power. It was as if you needed to have 2 completely separate heads to work synchronously. He looked at Leon, who was sitting on the floor pondering the challenge. Leon admitted it was difficult but stated, there is no choice if they want to come out victorious. After all, if their seniors can do it, then it is definitely possible for them too. The 2 friends firmly bumped fists without words, but with a silent agreement, they would work together. Only 2 weeks remained until the magical festival, so they threw themselves into exhausting training and each pushed themselves not to fall behind. Late that night he lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. Lessons from the day spun in his head and thoughts about the mechanics of magical control twisted tighter and tighter until he could no longer lie still. Eventually, he sat up straighter to train. In one hand, he tried to conjure a fireball, in the other a protective barrier. He managed to summon both for a moment, but the shield flickered and almost immediately faded, and he realized that maintaining a perfect 50-50 balance of attention is like writing a letter with one hand and drawing a portrait with the other. The young mage sharply turned to his companion, Mozo, and inspiration suddenly flashed. He asked the mobile entity to split into 2 separate forms and change shape at random intervals, hoping that such an unpredictable target would force his mind to engage in rapid shifts and maintain focus. It was difficult for him to keep up with Mozo's rapid transformations. He tried to adjust the magical output to the whimsical changing forms. It was exhausting the moment he lost concentration. The spells immediately disappeared, yet he thanked his little friend for invaluable help in his solitary training. He stands ready on the training ground and, politely addressing, asks for another round of instructions to continue learning. Nearby, Lodi sparkles with confidence and jokingly warns that she won't be as easily defeated as yesterday. Quentin, as always composed, accepts the challenge while they prepare for the training fight, and Reed also stands nearby to join the clash. When the start signal echoes across the field, the air instantly turns into pure focus. Quentin wastes no time, immediately conjures several intricate magical circles simultaneously. His movements are smooth and precise as he takes the initiative. Sensing the difficulty of the upcoming assault, the young mage narrows his eyes and mentally divides the mana with surgical precision, directing half the power to the protective barrier on his left hand, and splitting the other half into 2 separate offensive strikes with his right, testing the limits of simultaneous spellcasting. Next begins the clash, a whirlwind of light and motion. Despite careful calculations, his attacks are repelled, and both Lodi and Reed suddenly find themselves confused by unexpected countermaneuvers. Such speed of exchange forces everyone to barely stay on their feet against Quentin's superior technique. Wiping sweat from his brow, a triumphant smile cuts across his face as he realizes his experimental mana split really worked under pressure. Nearby, Lodi fiercely grumbles at Quentin for hitting her in the back. While Reed recovers from the blow end, their opponent simply smiles calmly and kindly as if he knew it all along. His brief joy is cut short by a sharp realization. Before he can react, glowing magical shackles snap tightly around his body, pinning his arms to his sides. Quentin moves predatory and smoothly, noting he managed to neutralize the first of his 3 opponents. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, he lowers his gaze to the flickering bands of light and asks what magic caught him. Quentin explains, it is a specialized capture spell designed to stop the fight without lethal force. The senior student continues the lesson, emphasizing, a true magical battle goes far beyond simple clashes of power. He warns they must always be on guard against interfering magic, because the rules of the clash allow any technique capable of disrupting the opponent's rhythm. He watches Leon's reaction while Louisa explains the intricacies of interference magic. She says that students from North Dorm, like herself, are well-versed in such techniques and warns Leon to be prepared for them at the upcoming festival. Relying on this advice, the trio plunges into an exhausting training regimen throughout July. with days merging into a continuous whirl of spells and physical exertion. Leon squeezes out his maximum every time and often collapses to the ground from exhaustion, honing his control over mana. On the eve of Magic Festival, the results of their hard work are already visible. Despite physical exhaustion, Reed and Lodi discussed progress. In their 3-on-1 against Quinnen, they only achieved 40 wins, but the chance against similar freshmen is significantly higher. Still catching his breath after the final training session, the young mage sincerely thanks the senior students for their support. He vows to stay focused and give his all in the main performance. Look burns with new determination. Later that same evening, as the sun sets over the dormitory, a voice reaches him announcing the arrival of a letter. He is surprised, for correspondence from his father is a rare connection to home life amid the intensity of the academy. As soon as he reads the content, his face lights up with pure joy and he shares the news. His family, especially Marcus, will come to the festival to watch him compete. This news ignites a competitive fire in both him and Reed. They growl that they are not going to lose in front of their loved ones. When darkness falls, the creak and knock of the carriage wheels on the cobblestones announce the arrival of visitors at the academy gates. The air is thick with anticipation, torn by the shouts of students swearing to achieve victory at the coming dawn. Finally, the morning of the festival arrived, and before the entire crowd, the huge gates of the academy opened. He moved toward the very heart of the celebration, managing to say words of sincere gratitude at the end, and was ready to face all the trials and expectations awaiting him that day. He stands, clutching his hands tightly to his chest. The anxiety already gnawing at him is visible to the naked eye as the festival approaches. Feeling this, the instructor approaches from behind and places a steady hand on his shoulder, asking if his nervousness has finally caught up with him due to the long-awaited arrival. He admits there is some fear, his voice quiet, but the older man meets him with a confident smile and assures him, with the grand progress he has made over the last month, there is absolutely nothing to fear. Encouraged by these words, he raises his gaze with new determination, his eyes flash with readiness. With a loud battle cry, he confirms, ready, finally to step onto the big stage and accept any challenges the Magic Festival throws at him. Behind, the instructor watches, satisfaction evident in his gaze how the boy has grown. Finally, the morning of the Magic Festival arrived. Leon abruptly opened his eyes and froze, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the day's events began to settle on him. He glanced at the clock, noting it was still too early, and nearby Reed was drifting in a deep, noisy sleep, ignoring the rising sun. Stretching his limbs to shake off the last traces of sleep, he feels a sharp, trembling pulse in his chest, a clear sign that nerves are taking hold. He decides to quietly take a walk to organize his thoughts and wonders if any of his peers have also risen before dawn. As he makes his way through the quiet corridors, the words of Oda and Nina about their habit of tending the greenery at dawn come to mind. He thinks he will find them near the flower beds, turns the corner and sees a familiar figure in the distance, but it is not the one he expected. He greets with a smile and the figure turns and Louise steps outside. She responds with a gentle, all-knowing smile that slightly throws him off balance. They stand together in the corridor, morning light filtering through the windows, and she asks if he is looking for Heathcliff, carefully scanning his face. She quietly giggles, noting that every thought seems to show on his face as if written openly, then addresses him by surname Heartfilia with a playful sparkle in her eyes. He explains that he was simply admiring the flowers and admits, waking up at this hour to tend the plants used to be his daily habit, a life that, though only a few days have passed, already feels like a distant, nostalgic memory. He stands quietly while the morning light seeps through the corridor and notices the prince approaching with an uncharacteristic gloom. When they stop, the silence between them thickens with tension. Heathcliff stands motionless and Leon can only watch, helplessly lost, feeling the air change. Suddenly, without warning, the prince bends his torso into a deep, respectful bow, a sight so unexpected that Leon momentarily loses the power of speech. Without changing his posture, he begins to speak, his voice steady as he admits his former arrogance. He says he was a fool. Now he understands how, preaching the Academy's high ideals, he secretly harbored a sense of superiority over the common folk, confused by Darren's influence. He continues with a sincere request, stating that he does not intend to make excuses for his actions. He understands if he is not forgiven, but insists he had to at least offer these apologies to atone for his selfishness. Still bowed low, he adds, if he does not take this step, he feels he will never truly move forward in his life. Touched by this display of honesty, Leon quietly exhales and smiles, saying he does not mind and is glad to see the real Heathcliff. After that, he suggests they extend the apologies to others and the prince agrees, nodding gratefully. After they resolved the rift between them, the two went together to the flower beds where their friends had gathered, ready to start the festival on a new footing. He explains the situation to his friends, relaying Heathcliff's sincere apology and makes a shrug acknowledging that if Leon is willing to trust him, then there is no reason to hold a grudge. Louis nods quietly in agreement, and her initial hostility fades as she listens to the story of how the prince changed his mind. Despite the acceptance, she reminds them they were not the main targets of Heathcliff's past cruelty. She emphasizes that the apologies truly need to be earned by Lena and Marcia. They were the ones directly traumatized. And she adds that contact is currently forbidden. Professor Grant has issued a restraining order, so until the girls recover emotionally. Realizing this, he grabs his chest. The weight of his guilt presses him to the ground, and he understands true forgiveness is still far away. Feeling the heavy atmosphere, the energetic youth breaks the tension with a wide, toothy smile and says that even if he does not fully understand all the nuances, Leon has still changed for the better, and that is enough for him to move on. He continues advising them to leave this gloom behind and focus on the upcoming magical festival, challenging them all to a serious competition to test their skills. Louisa picks up, her excitement rising as she declares she will not hold back against. Moved by their unexpected kindness, he can only sincerely thank them, while Lodi watches the scene with a relieved smile. Their attention is suddenly caught by an amazing sight, a huge, luxurious amphitheater floating above the academy in the sky. As the festivities begin, students gather in groups near the glowing teleportation circles to enter the high platform, while spectators wonder how the rest of the witnesses will reach the magnificent stage. The royal capital Fountain Square buzzes, transformed into the center of magical hustle. Intricate line patterns for each dormitory are drawn into the ground. It is a grand work that draws crowds from everywhere to watch the start of the festive preparations while students set off for the arena. Stepping onto one of the glowing circles, the energetic Kane and Lodi prepare to jump. With a synchronized countdown, they tense as magic flares, and in a moment a whirlwind of light transports them to the suspended stadium. They emerge into the luxurious abyss of the main arena. The incredible scale of the stadium and the roar of the thousand-strong crowd momentarily leave them speechless. Excitement fills the air, and their hearts leap as they gaze at the enormous essence of the festival. Sitting in the host seat, Lodi Hyler greets the assembly with a radiant smile and addresses the masses. Her voice carries across the arena, welcoming everyone to the second-year presentation. Meanwhile, in the South Dormitory waiting yard, the air is thick with tension. Students prepare for the trials ahead. Above the entire spectacle, a vigilant eye in the sky, a bird keeps watch, never taking its gaze off the unfolding events, while the official announcement echoes in the air and signals the start of the opening ceremony. Among the spectators and participants, confidence runs high. Grant boasts of victory already this year, while Leonard and Louisa exchange sharp barbs, each side certain of their advantage in the upcoming magical duels. A mighty roar thunders and a dazzling firework bursts. The magic festival is officially declared open. Students are called to show their talents and fight fairly for victory. They harden, tempered by the weight of tradition already accepted and upheld. Watching the celebration, Quentin remains unusually quiet. His thoughts press with the realization this will be his last festival. Grant notices his gloomy mood and tries to lighten the atmosphere, reminding him that the excitement has just begun, so there is no need to wear such a serious face. He stands quietly while friends offer support. Reed speaks first, assuring that they all share the same feelings. Louise agrees promptly and approvingly. With a firm nod, she emphasizes that they are united in their goal. Above them, the sky explodes with a dazzling display of magical fireworks, illuminating the grand arena. Despite the celebration, he is still lost in thought, his gaze fixed on the spectacle, while his companions stand nearby in a moment of shared silence. Turning his attention to the celebrations, Leon drives closer to Marcushi's, eyes sparkling with excitement. He eagerly suggests they go together to find his family, and Marcus responds with a joyful shout of agreement. His face shines at the very prospect. Together, they make their way through the crowd at the stadium, sliding their gazes along the rows of spectators. They need to find the exact section reserved for the commoners of the Southern Dormitory, so while the event is just gaining momentum, they push through the noisy stairs. Suddenly he notices something in the distance and, smiling, points with his finger. Marcus leans closer and a pure curiosity lights up his face as he tries to see what exactly caught his friend's attention amid the chaos of the crowd. In the center of the arena, she commands the stage, movements smooth and precise as she weaves a massive whirlwind of magical energy. The crowd whispers in awe, impressed that a young student holds her own alongside the third-year season in such a complex magical dance. Looking at the screen, Marcus watches mesmerized as ice crystals and snow frost shimmer, forming into majestic beasts. Leon explains, "This is the magic of the North, a cold and beautiful force that adds a touch of winter to the festive grounds," and Marcus freezes in complete awe. When the night thickens, he finds a quiet moment by the window. Next to him sits a small dark mozo. He is overwhelmed by a feeling of deep nostalgia, so familiar as if he had already lived this moment once in a distant dream. He is suddenly torn from his thoughts. A small figure rushes at him with a joyful exclamation, calling for his older brother. Surprised, he grabs the boy and, feeling a wave of warmth, understands. It is truly Marcus, holding onto him with pure, unadulterated happiness. A sudden reunion rapidly grows as soon as their parents step forward, their faces shining with pride and tenderness. The mother notices how much both boys have grown, her gaze warming with love, and the father greets them warmly, recalling how much time has passed since their last meeting. He is overwhelmed with emotion. He calls out to them the burden of a long separation, finally lifting as a gentle hand rests on Marcus's head in a soothing gesture. When the family settles into their warmth, he introduces Marcus to his new friends and proudly confirms that the boy is his kin. The kin, usually loud and confident, suddenly turns into a complete bundle of nerves in front of Leon's parents, standing as if rooted to the spot, a blush on his face and wide-open eyes. The young man makes the official introduction so loudly that he almost stumbles over his words, mistakenly calling himself Mark, then immediately corrects himself. He states that he is Leon's friend and asks for their favor too politely, almost to the point of being intrusive. Leon stands next to Reed and Marcus so tense that sweat appears on his temples. Reed notices how his comrade is frozen and bursts out laughing, teasing him, saying he's nervous in such a formal setting. Lion's conversation is cut short by the arrival of his parents Dominic and Ren. Ren greets with a warm smile. She thanks the boys for coming and suggests that when all the day's events are over, they go together to a festive dinner. Looking at them, Marcus brightens his face and with a joyful exclamation rushes to his parents. Leon and Reed immediately straighten up and make a deep, respectful bow to the elders, acknowledging their presence with due respect. Then he properly introduces himself to the group, his voice steady, though he had been shaking with nerves before. "Read it, he is so energetic," growls a greeting at full volume. And while Marcus involuntarily becomes the center of gentle attention, he almost burns with embarrassment because they are patting him on the head. The adults smiled as they watched the scene, and Ren noted how Leon had become polite and well-mannered during his absence. She contrasted his mature behavior with the wilder nature of the other boys, and a wave of good-natured laughter spread through the family and friends. When they start to leave, a pair of boots rhythmically stomp on the stone floor. A hoarse voice grumbles quietly, complaining that he is treated like a small child, especially when Leon watches as fatherly tenderness is shown. He quickly shakes off a moment of annoying irritation and turns back to Leon, revealing a wide, toothy smile, saying how nice it is to see everyone so happy, and his infectious energy returns in full as he prepares for the next part of the day. This observation makes Leon stop. A slight surprise flickers on his face. His friend continues and, chuckling, notes how much Leon has come to resemble his father Dominic, both in appearance and character. He lowered his gaze and his voice barely trembled as he admitted, "They are not alike at all." Nearby, Marcus even recoiled. The sharp phrase completely threw him off track. Staring into sad contemplation, the boy ran his hand through his light hair, realizing only he had such strange strands and eyes. Even his own face shape seemed alien to him against the family he loved. The burden of truth crushed him as he stood alone in the encroaching shadows. It was not just the lack of physical resemblance, the truth was that there was not even a blood relation between them. Breaking the heavy silence, Reed looked at the sky and he had a thoughtful expression. He objected, "The bond between them is not defined by something as simple as physical features." Leon turned to him and at that moment a complete lack of understanding flashed across his face. His companions flailed in search of words, then fixated on the idea of the shared atmosphere that held them together. A dark-haired young man with a loud smile threw his arm over Leon's shoulder and pulled him closer. He declared that it was clear to everyone, Leon was raised by these very people, because his sincere and generous nature is a direct reflection of the family that shaped him. A barely noticeable soft smile finally touched Leon's lips as he looked at his friend. A quiet thanks to Marcus, the brother of his heart, echoed in his thoughts. When Reed asked if he had said something, Leon only shook his head and kept this precious realization to himself. That moment of silence and reflection was swept away by a wave of roaring. The crowd thundered in the huge academy arena, which from the inside still seemed somewhat like the waiting room at South Dormitory. The students were fixated on the scoreboard, trembling with hope. Their current acceleration would lead to a decisive victory. The students gathered with their backs to the world, preparing to burst into the academic competition battle. As they rolled up to the entrance, Marcus turned around and with a smile declared that it was now his turn to go out. A loud voice from the intercom thundered, calling the participants to gather for the magical obstacle race. Just as Leon started to leave, Quentin suddenly grabbed him and declared that Leon needed to prepare for his own event. Despite his protests, the supervisor began stripping off his standard uniform, insisting that there was no time to waste. In a moment he appeared completely different, covered in an incredibly exquisite, intricately decorated protective wizard's attire which looked too flashy even for a simple match. He asked why he needed such a costume, but his friends quickly brushed off his doubts. As a representative, he had to look the part to raise the crowd. He remained skeptical, tugging at the unfamiliar fabric, but Marcus's enthusiasm was contagious. He shouted that this outfit was actually incredibly cool. His praise barely eased his embarrassment, but the energy of the moment was undeniable. Seeing his friends genuinely happy, he couldn't hold back. He relaxed a little, although he still felt like a showpiece. Marcus's words of support became a tiny consolation against the pressure looming before the upcoming fight. But soon it dawned on him he had been played, made a fool of. Looking around, he saw that the other representatives were still in their standard academy uniforms, and his exquisite costume stood out like a painful stain. To make matters worse, his comrades began crowding around for a commemorative photo, capturing his humiliation for posterity. He buried his face in his hands, wishing the earth would swallow him whole, and the flash of the device finally sealed his fate, making him the most overdressed participant of the day. He stands still and trembles, a mixture of rage and deep humiliation inside him. The huge wizard's hat almost swallows his head. Louisa looks at him with a weary face, acknowledging the absurdity of the whole situation, while he mumbles about what a disgrace it is. While he suffers silently, Ulnard Schween shows a striking contrast, confidently holding an elegant curved staff that catches the light. When praised for the weapon, he explains with a bold smirk that it is a product of his homeland, perfectly balanced for his grip. When the group gathers, others soon join him, and the conversation shifts to the missing representative of the Eastern Dormitory. They had heard rumors that Darren Lowe was supposed to participate, but the final decision seemed to have been made at the very last second. Their assumptions are interrupted by Reed Falls. He steps onto the stage and addresses the gathered students and faculty. He commands attention and prepares to announce the official update about the upcoming magical combat competition among freshmen. He explains that Darren Lowe had to withdraw from the match due to injuries he sustained during the previous obstacle course. With a loud, broad smile, the leader offers a replacement and asks the other dorm representatives if they agree to accept a new opponent instead of Darren. He is met with wary glances from a trio of representatives. They quickly calculate the sudden change in the lineup, while the crowd begins to buzz with impatient anticipation. The unexpected rearrangement in the battle formation adds a new layer of uncertainty before the upcoming duel. He is almost immediately pushed aside by a new presence. When a young woman in the crowd gasps with admiration, all eyes shift to the familiar figure stepping onto the arena. Steady, measured steps echo dully on the stone floor, and the mysterious substitute enters the game. He steps into the beam of light and becomes visible. It is Heathcliff Dewin, the second prince. A calm, confident smile. He nods at the roaring crowd and is ready to take his place in the competition.